Chapter 41. Sister, this is the basic forging method. I'll show you. Study it carefully. Ye Tian stood in the courtyard and demonstrated the basic body forging technique himself. Ye Yu watched intently. In just 7 or 8 days, she had thoroughly mastered the fundamentals and was ready to cultivate on her own. At first, Ye Tian withheld the ferocious beast blood. He wanted her to build a solid foundation first, at least to reach the basic martial level, before he introduced any external enhancements. Once she had that footing, he planned to give her low-grade beast blood to assist her further. While Ye Yu practiced, Ye Tian did not idle. He used the same stretch of time to advance his own cultivation. When the period ended, his strength had climbed again. His raw power reached 35,000 pounds, with the multiplier granted by his high-strength talent. That was effectively the equivalent of 350,000 pounds. Such rapid progress would make many martial artists envious, but Ye Tian still wasn't satisfied. He knew his breakthrough had come from being a high-tier cultivation talent. What would happen to those with top-tier or higher talents? The thought drove him on. He intended to keep pushing his limits and find ways to accelerate his advancement even further. He needed to grow stronger fast. If he could copy another talent to augment himself, his power would only keep expanding. Sooner or later, his ability might dominate the land, perhaps even the Sea of Stars. Soon, in a few days, I'll be able to replicate the talent again, Ye Tian thought with eager anticipation. That morning, he headed into the wilderness to hunt a fresh batch of intermediate beasts. His cultivation required the blood of intermediate fierce beasts, and that blood was astonishingly rare. It hardly ever appeared on the black market, and when it did, it was snapped up instantly by warriors from the great families. Ye Tian could sometimes buy a little, but the quantities were always tiny. Because he was a high-level cultivator, he refined intermediate fierce beast blood far faster than ordinary elites and consumed far more of it. His own supply had long since been exhausted, and the small amounts he could purchase were completely inadequate for his needs. There was no choice. He had to go into the wild and replenish his stock himself. As he walked down the street, Ye Tian noticed clusters of warriors moving in groups, each lugging large sacks and smaller packs. He could make out provisions and everyday supplies peeking from their bags. What caught his attention most was how different they looked from the fighters he was used to seeing at the coastal base. "Those are elite fighters," he muttered when he counted one group and found more than a dozen highly skilled martial artists inside. He was surprised and uneasy. He'd passed at least 3 such teams on his way. These weren't small trading caravans. They looked like reinforcements. They must be from another base, he guessed. So many elite warriors entering the coastal base at once meant something major had happened. Even though Linhai Base and Iron Tooth Base traded occasionally, they would never send this many elites for routine business. And these teams didn't look like they were just passing through. They looked like they intended to stay. Ye Tian didn't dwell on it. He left the base and went out to hunt beasts. At the same time, back with the Lin family, Lin Wanli, Lin Zhe, and several of the senior warriors gathered, their faces tight with concern. "Big brother, is the report accurate?" Lin Wanli asked, frowning. Lin Wanli sighed. "The report came from Iron Tooth Base's Dark Line. It has to be true. I'd always felt something off about Iron Tooth Base's sudden eagerness to help our coastal garrison. No one helps that freely without a reason. It turned out I was right. At first I didn't want to believe it, but after checking the sources again and again, the picture was undeniable. Iron Tooth is a medium-sized outpost, 2 masters and a few dozen Season A D fighters, but it's on the lower end of medium. They recently found a huge pack of fierce beasts nearby, and the leader of that pack is on the verge of transforming into a king. If the transformation succeeds, the whole pack will swell, and Iron Tooth Base will be the first place to suffer the consequences. Stopping that leader would solve their crisis, but they are simply not capable of facing that threat alone. They're overwhelmed, directionless, and desperate, which explains why they were suddenly so eager to move into our coastal base. The Iron Tooth Base had exhausted every option. They had reached out to the other major bases for reinforcements, but none of the strong fighters were willing to relocate. With no help forthcoming, the Iron-Tooth leaders decided their only hope to protect their people was to move the entire base into the nearest coastal settlement, Linhai. Knowing Linhai might refuse them outright, the Iron-Tooth leadership proposed a trade cooperation agreement, a diplomatic pretext meant to smooth the way for the relocation. The Lin family's senior warriors were alarmed. If Iron-Tooth's fighters were allowed into Linhai, the existing balance of power would be shattered. The Lin family might even lose its dominant position in the base. "Big brother, should we refuse the Iron-Tooth warriors' entry into Linhai?" Lin asked. "No more," Lin Wanli said, shaking his head. "We already signed a contract with the Iron-Tooth base. If we break it, they'll have an excuse to move against the Lin family. They're using trade as a pretext to bring in large numbers of fighters to the coastal base. They call it commerce, but what they're really doing is settling in. We can't just drive them out. Once a crowd of martial artists and ordinary people from Iron-Tooth move in, the coastal base won't be ours anymore." For a long while, no one had an answer. People sat and thought, casting about for options, but only helplessness came back. "We'll have to take it one step at a time," Lin Wanli resigned. That evening, Ye Tian returned with parts from an intermediate fierce beast and a large quantity of its blood. Afterward, he questioned Windwolf and the others and learned the true extent of the situation. The Iron-Tooth base wasn't sending people here to trade so much as to rent houses and villas and build permanent homes. They clearly planned to stay. In the days that followed, the news began to spread. People from the Iron-Tooth base were already moving out and preparing to pour into the coastal base. Many of them had begun building houses on the land just outside the coastal base, intending to expand the settlement to accommodate the influx. The Lin family could do nothing to stop it. The land beyond the coastal base wasn't officially theirs, but wilderness, and building there didn't technically violate any rules. The reason for the Iron-Tooth exodus had finally become clear. A pack of ferocious beasts had attacked, and the Iron-Tooth base had been all but wiped out. Ye Tian was taken aback when he heard. Iron-Tooth had been a medium-sized settlement, and even had 2 masters defending it, but that hadn't been enough. For now, the coastal base was fortunate. It lay in a relatively safe area. Still, there was no guarantee that luck would hold. If the beasts that destroyed Iron-Tooth ever shifted their attention, they could sweep toward the coastal base next, and that day the coastal base might face the same fate. "You have to get stronger. Fast. Only power can keep you and your sister safe." Ye Tian urged himself, voice tight with urgency. From that moment he trained like a man possessed. His progress accelerated. Every session pushed him farther than the last, and his strength grew at an ever-quickening pace. One day he sat at home, combing through the records of countless beasts. He was hunting for one with extraordinary speed whose talent he could emulate. Then suddenly, his eyes locked on a single entry, the Black Wolf Panther. Chapter 42. The Black Wolf Panther was technically a low-level beast, but it moved faster than most mid-level predators. A few people had spotted one near the coastal base, but it was so quick that even average elite warriors couldn't catch it, and they eventually gave up the hunt. Ye Tian read the report and murmured, "Little Thousand-Leaf Forest." He didn't know much about the Little Thousand-Leaf Forest, only that it was enormous, said to stretch for thousands of miles, and the stand of trees by the coastal base was only one of its outlying branches. The edge in question lay 18 kilometers west of the coastal base. Few warriors ever went into that branch. The forest itself was known to harbor fierce beasts, while the area outside it contained only common, weak creatures. That danger kept most hunters away. Only after you push several miles into the Little Thousand-Leaf Forest do the true dangers begin. Fierce beasts start appearing one after another, and you can run into intermediate and even high-level predators. The deeper you go, the deadlier it gets. Fortunately, those beasts rarely leave the forest, so the coastal Linhai base isn't directly threatened. My cultivation has been improving far too slowly, Ye Tian thought. The Little Thousand-Leaf Forest really is an excellent place to train. If I can find the Black Wolf Panther in there, I'll reach my goal. If I can't find it, I can at least locate a suitable talent to copy and spend some time cultivating inside the forest. He had wanted to go out for a long time. Linhai base was small and had few resources. That made it hard to copy the right talents, which in turn slowed his advancement. He used to worry about his sister, but now she had begun cultivating herself, and the Mo family's threat had been neutralized. All he needed to do was hire a few reliable bodyguards to watch over her, then everything would be fine. Who should I ask to protect my sister? Ye Tian wondered. One name came to mind immediately: Windwolf. Captain of the Windwolf hunting squad, he and his team spent most of their time at the base keeping order. They were more than capable of handling anything short of an elite warrior. Besides, Ye Tian didn't want Ye Yu trailed by an obvious bodyguard. What he needed was discreet protection. Someone to quietly shadow her and step in the moment trouble appeared. The squad had plenty of members. Sending 1 or 2 warriors on a short assignment was no problem. So Ye Tian went to see Windwolf in person and offered a reward: dozens of vials of intermediate fierce beast blood. Windwolf accepted without hesitation. Little Chiba Forest. As soon as Ye Tian entered, he was met by a forest of towering trees. Some rose tens of meters into the sky, others reached nearly 100. Their trunks were massive, 2 to 4 meters across, and the canopy closed above like a green roof, casting the floor in dappled shade. Ye Tian walked for hundreds of meters and found the place matched the information he'd been given. Near the edges of the Little Chiba Forest, there were almost no ferocious beasts, only common prey animals. It was as if the forest enforced a strict hierarchy. Weak creatures lived along the perimeter, while stronger beasts held the inner rings, and the prey were not allowed to wander into the beast's territory. That was only his conjecture, though. He had no proof. He kept running for miles through towering trees until, gradually, the signs of larger predators appeared. He slowed and stopped. This was the ferocious beast's territory now, and he had to be careful. High-level predators sometimes showed up here, and some of them, especially the powerful high-tier beasts with unusual talents, were far beyond what he could provoke or handle. For days Ye Tian had been hunting through the area for any sign of the black wolf leopard, but the creature remained elusive. Still, he'd managed to kill several mid-level ferocious beasts and gather plenty of their blood. He wouldn't be short of supplies anytime soon. If only he had a talent for wide-range perception, he thought he might have found the black wolf leopard already. Then, as he walked, he noticed tracks, not just 1 or 2, but a whole trail. They looked part wolf, part leopard. The claw marks in the soil matched descriptions he'd heard of the black wolf leopard. It could be it. He had to check. Ye Tian pushed his speed to triple and followed the claw prints. After racing for several miles, he came to a halt. A powerful fluctuation of yuan force rolled over the area, definitely the residue of a fight. Ye Tian's face grew serious. There was a battle ahead. Humans were unlikely to be here. If anything lived nearby, it would be a fierce beast. Fierce beasts fought one another all the time. There were too many species for peaceful coexistence, and even members of the same species often turned on each other. After moving a few hundred meters forward, the sounds of battle grew louder. Strange, blood-choked cries sliced through the air. Ye Tian crept closer and peered into a flattened clearing. Dozens of giant trees lay uprooted and broken. Around 1,000 black wolves and leopards swarmed a single massive gorilla, yet the advantage lay with the gorilla. It was a high-level beast, and not an ordinary one. Its power was enough to rival a great martial artist at the peak of their strength. Ye Tian didn't dare reveal himself. He stilled his breath and slipped into the shadows, activating his shadow talent to fuse with the dark beneath a giant tree. The gorilla's combat strength reminded Ye Tian of the Qinglao he'd seen that day. It was far above his current level. He wouldn't stand a chance in a straight fight. His speed was inferior. If he tried to run, he wouldn't get away. His shadow talent couldn't hide him from a high-level fierce beast like this, and only his top-tier healing talent might keep him alive if things went badly. But if he couldn't escape and the gorilla pummeled him, he might really be beaten to death. Gorillas aren't something you mess with, he thought, and stopped paying it any more attention. He turned his focus to the black wolf leopards instead. They were his real targets. Their situation was grim. Hundreds had already been killed, yet the survivors still swarmed the gorilla, refusing to flee, as if fearless of death. Ye Tian shook his head at their recklessness. Then, suddenly, his gaze fixed on one particular black wolf leopard, and for a moment it seemed to glow under his stare. "No, call it the golden wolf leopard," someone corrected. "It's related to the black wolf leopard, but this one's coat is all gold. It just looks noble-blooded." The assessment made sense. The creature was impressive, a mid-tier fierce beast, but its speed outmatched the gorilla. The gorilla couldn't catch it, yet the golden wolf leopard still couldn't pierce the gorilla's defenses. Speed gave it the edge, but not the finishing blow. "That speed talent has to be above that of a normal black wolf leopard," another voice muttered. "Otherwise, it wouldn't be so ridiculous. How can a mid-tier fierce beast be faster than a gorilla at peak high-tier speed? This has to be a high-speed talent, doesn't it?" Ye Tian felt his chest tighten. If he could get that talent, his power would skyrocket. There was no doubt about it. Chapter 43. Ye Tian had been watching from concealment, waiting for the great battle between the two sides to reach its conclusion. Half an hour dragged by, and the number of black wolf leopards had dwindled to 200 or 300. The ground was carpeted with their bodies. Such losses would cripple the Black Wolf Panther clan, yet they still did not break and retreat. After such prolonged fighting, the gorilla's strength was nearly spent. Its speed and power had declined, its reactions sluggish. Then it screamed. Ye Tian saw exactly what happened. The golden wolf leopard seized the moment, launching a lightning-fast strike while the gorilla's reflexes lagged, and before the beast could react, its claws ripped out one of the gorilla's eyes. Blinded in one eye, the gorilla panicked and tried to flee, but it was already too slow. The golden wolf leopard pursued relentlessly, and some of the remaining black wolf leopards, heedless of death, hurled themselves in to block its escape. While the gorilla was distracted by the desperate attackers, the golden wolf leopard struck again, tearing out its other eye. Blinded completely, the gorilla lost all fighting capability. A swarm of black wolf leopards tore into the gorilla, teeth sinking deep and claws raking flesh. They attacked in such numbers that the beast had no time to recover. Gradually, the great gorilla collapsed, its vitality ebbing away. The Black Wolf Panther clan paid a terrible price. Well over 1,000 of their warriors were lost in the assault. Whether that cost was worth a single high-level fierce beast's death was hard to say. Ye Tian, however, knew who had tipped the balance: the golden wolf leopard. Its power approached that of a high-level fierce beast, and its speed was blistering. It had fixed its gaze on the gorilla and kept it off balance. Without that golden wolf leopard drawing the beast's attention, no number of black wolf leopards could have brought it down. "It's my turn," Ye Tian said, a trace of excitement in his voice. He didn't fear the black wolf leopards, not even the golden one. The gorilla had been overwhelmed by exhaustion and the golden wolf leopard's tactics. Ye Tian was different. Blessed with a top-tier healing talent, he could recover quickly even from heavy blows. He had no fear that the golden wolf leopard could finish him. Swish! He moved. Ye Tian lunged forward and cut down the black wolf leopard in an instant. The golden wolf leopard, which had been tearing into the gorilla carcass, froze and let out a furious roar. This was its territory. Any intruder must die, and it was going to deal with the newcomer itself. Sniffing Ye Tian, it judged his aura far weaker than the gorilla's. Such a small opponent could be finished with a single swipe. Before Ye Tian even saw it move, the golden wolf leopard struck. It was too fast to track. A claw raked through his side. "Heal!" Ye Tian barked, and in the blink of an eye the wound closed, the torn flesh knitting back as if nothing had happened. The golden wolf leopard stood stunned. It had clearly seen its claw slice through Ye Tian's body, even watched his belly gape open, yet the injury vanished in an instant. The beast's expression shifted from anger to disbelief, almost a rueful, "What a pity." Ye Tian simply looked at the golden wolf leopard and sighed. Ye Tian had tried to read the creature's talent, but it moved so fast his mind couldn't keep up. He only managed a hurried glance and had no time to copy anything. Even from that brief look, he had to admit the leopard's gifts were beyond anything he'd expected, almost uncanny. Its common name was the golden wolf leopard, but its true species name was the golden silk dragon leopard. Its talents were extraordinary. Species: golden silk dragon leopard. Bloodline talent: top, speed talent, top, endurance talent, medium, healing talent. Primary endurance reflects stamina. The leopard's medium endurance explains how it could spar with the gorilla for so long without showing signs of fatigue. Coupled with its her talents, that middle-level endurance gave it remarkably strong physical staying power. What a formidable bloodline. Top tier. As long as this golden silk dragon leopard survives, it's bound to become a top fierce beast. Its talent is extraordinary. Once it matures, it could easily slaughter a group of masters. Ye Tian's mind raced. He wanted nothing more than to dispose of the beast, but his strength was far inferior. All he could rely on was his healing talent to keep himself alive. The leopard struck again. Ye Tian barely reacted in time. The blow nearly snapped his neck. Fortunately, the healing talent kicked in and kept him from dying. In the aftermath, he finally succeeded in copying one of the beast's traits, its top speed talent. I have to keep it from clawing my head or grabbing me. That would finish me, he thought. He drew his sword. The blade unfolded, and he began to unleash a flurry of shadow strikes, carving a ring of sword chi around his body. The sword chi formed both a defensive shell and an offensive field. That combination of protection and attack, fueled by his newfound skill, was enough to pose a real threat to the golden silk dragon leopard. The golden silk dragon leopard was fast, but speed alone couldn't pierce Ye Tian's barrier. As long as the wall of sword chi held, the beast couldn't touch him, and if it struck the barrier head-on, it would only injure itself. Back, Ye Tian ordered, and kept falling back, retreating to safer ground. The leopard lunged several times, each time smashing into the sword chi and nearly shredding its claws on the invisible edge. He could feel how effectively his sword technique sapped its momentum. If not for that, he wouldn't have been able to get away. His heart was still racing. After putting some distance between them, Ye Tian realized the leopard had stopped pursuing. It had finally abandoned the chase. Relief washed over him. Thank goodness, he thought. If it hadn't given up, my stamina and internal energy wouldn't have lasted much longer. Continuously casting shadow killing is exhausting. He admitted to himself that he'd been reckless this time. He'd assumed he had nothing to fear from the golden silk dragon leopard, only to find he'd badly underestimated how dangerous it truly was. Watching a battle and actually taking part in one were two completely different experiences. If it hadn't been for the stack of cards at his disposal, he wouldn't have escaped with his life today. Risking everything had paid off, though. The payoff was significant. Top speed talent, huh? Ye Tian laughed to himself. Once I fuse this, who am I going to be afraid of? The golden dragon leopard? A top-tier beast like a gorilla? Not a chance. Confidence surged through him. He found a towering old tree, hacked a hole into its trunk, and hollowed out a crude log cabin inside. When the work was done, he sealed the entrance with a carved slab of wood, then crawled into the dim, protected chamber to begin the fusion. A small system notification flickered in his vision. Dragon Boat Festival. Read books every day. Recharge 100 to receive 500 VIP coupons. Snap up immediately. Event period, June 3rd to June 5. Ye Tian settled himself, breathed deep, and forced a grin. Start fusion! Chapter 44. Every talent fusion felt like a transformation for Ye Tian. It was painful, but the gains made the pain worthwhile. Having fused many talents before, this latest melding of the top speed talent wasn't as agonizing as he'd feared. Before long, it was over. Checking his talents was the first thing he always did afterward, and the most exciting. The list appeared before him. Human, Ye Tian. Cultivation talent, advanced. Speed talent, top. Knife talent, medium. Shadow talent, primary. Healing talent, top. Strength talent, advanced. Seeing both the top healing talent and the top speed talent, Ye Tian couldn't help smiling. If only his other talents could reach top rank as well. Let's try this top speed, he told himself. He stepped out from the giant tree, activated the speed talent, and tested it. Swish! In an instant, he covered 100 meters. Even in the darkness, he felt as if he'd pierced some invisible barrier in the air. Sonic speed, the thought flashed through his mind. The speed of sound, the rate at which sound travels through air, is about 340 meters per second. Ye Tian discovered that his speed was far beyond the speed of sound. In fact, it was many times faster. After running test after test, he finally understood the scale of the change. 3,400 meters per second, 10 times the speed of sound. Compared with his previous top speed of only 170 meters per second, this was a 20-fold increase. Ye Tian said under his breath, astonished. A 20-fold jump was absurdly large. It completely ignored the usual limits set by cultivation realms. By his reckoning, even the absolute top speed a human great martial artist could achieve might only be 5 or 6 times the speed of sound. He had already surpassed that threshold. If he continued rising to the level of a great martial artist, his velocity would become even more extreme. With my current power, I can handle a peak great martial artist, he thought, smiling to himself. Before this breakthrough, his combat ability had been far below that peak, but this exceptional gift for speed more than made up the difference. Copying a powerful talent was the fastest way for him to raise his strength, but such opportunities were rare. He'd been lucky this time, and bold enough to take the chance. He had copied the Golden Silk Dragon Panther's speed talent. Without that, he never would have undergone such a dramatic transformation. It's time to deal with the Golden Silk Dragon Panther, Ye Tian said, without a trace of fear. Speed-wise, he was hardly at a disadvantage. The panther, being of a higher realm, could push its speed to a dozen or so times the speed of sound, but the difference between that and 10 times the speed of sound wasn't so great that he couldn't react. More importantly, Ye Tian had other advantages. His top-tier healing talent let him recover quickly, and his offensive power already surpassed ordinary martial artists, even if it still couldn't match the full might of the Golden Silk Dragon Panther. Ye Tian's overall strength far exceeded that of the Golden Silk Dragon Leopard, so he felt no fear of it. He backtracked along the path until he found what he was looking for. Found them. They didn't leave, he muttered. Ahead, a pack of black wolves and smaller leopards ringed the sleeping Golden Silk Dragon Leopard. Beside the great feline lay the mutilated corpse of a gorilla. Not whole, only half of it remained. The sight made Ye Tian's jaw tighten. The Golden Silk Dragon Leopard was clearly gnawing at the gorilla's flesh. It's digesting the corpse, he thought. Consuming a beast like that can strengthen a creature. It's the same idea as when humans refine a beast's blood to increase their own power. With the innate talent of the Golden Silk Dragon Leopard, finishing the gorilla's carcass would grant it a significant boost. It might not immediately leap to the rank of a high-level fierce beast, but the increase would be substantial enough to matter. Ye Tian didn't intend to give the leopard that opportunity. Golden Silk Dragon Leopard, fight me again! Ye Tian leapt forward and shouted. His voice cracked the air, fully rousing the beast. The leopard's vicious snarl and murderous eyes made its intent unmistakable. Human, you're dead. In an instant, the Golden Silk Dragon Leopard blurred and vanished. If Ye Tian hadn't fused the top-speed talent, he never would have been able to perceive the movement at all. Because he had, though, he saw the leopard strike. As its claws were about to rake him, Ye Tian flashed aside and his knife slashed through the space it had occupied. Fused with top speed and driven by his shadow kill technique, his motions were terrifyingly fast. The talent amplified every aspect of speed: running, striking, and reaction. The leopard miscalculated. It failed to evade Ye Tian's shadow kill, and the blade bit deep into its back. It yowled in pain and skidded away, eyes wide and fixed on Ye Tian with a look that plainly asked, "How are you so fast?" The golden leopard remembered clearly. Before this, it could have closed in on Ye Tian without difficulty. If not for the curtain of sword chi surrounding him, it would have been an easy kill. Now, though, Ye Tian actually dodged its strike, and his movement didn't noticeably slow it down. This was the first time the beast had faced an opponent whose cultivation was lower than its own, yet who wasn't much slower. The Golden Silk Dragon Leopard refused to yield. It lunged again, voice a low snarl as it unleashed the technique. Shadow Kill. Ye Tian answered in kind. He spun out Shadow Kill after Shadow Kill, each blade slice finding its target. The leopard's attacks hit hard, but its power hadn't yet reached that of a high-level ferocious beast. It simply couldn't outmatch Ye Tian. Still, every collision punished both combatants. The leopard species gave it unusually sturdy bones, and Ye Tian's weapon was only so-so. With a finer blade, one strike might have cleaved the beast in two. After a dozen exchanges, the golden silk dragon leopard was streaked with blood. Its movements soured. Its fighting spirit had visibly waned. The golden silk dragon leopard, which had once vowed to die rather than be taken, suddenly turned and fled. "I won't die," it howled as it bolted, abandoning even its own kin. "You're wounded, slower than before, and you still think you can run?" Ye Tian called after it, then surged into pursuit. 10 miles later, he closed the distance. With a single fierce stroke, his blade nearly severed the beast. It crashed to the ground not far away, gasping shallow breaths, too weakened to flee. Ye Tian stepped forward, ready to deliver the final blow. Instead of fighting on, the dragon leopard made a startling move. It dropped to its knees and began to kowtow, forehead striking the earth again and again. The meaning was unmistakable. It was surrendering. Chapter 45. Are you surrendering to me? Ye Tian asked, studying the golden silk dragon leopard with interest. He didn't lower his guard. A part of him worried the beast might be pretending to surrender, only to spring a hidden attack. Still, that seemed unlikely. The leopard was too badly injured to pull off a trick like that. The leopard gave a slow, deliberate nod, clearly understanding him. Ye Tian had long known that a few exceptional, ferocious beasts were unusually intelligent and could comprehend human speech. They were rare, though, and he hadn't expected to meet one today. "I don't trust you," he said coldly. "What if you're faking it and decide to strike when I let my guard down?" Without warning, a faint light flickered on the leopard's forehead. The beam sliced through the air and impossibly slipped into Ye Tian's mind. His first instinct was to flinch. He prepared for a mental ambush, but the intrusion wasn't hostile. Instead, a childish voice rang out in his head. "Master!" The tone was like that of a 3-year-old, high and bright. Still, Ye Tian knew immediately who was speaking. "Golden silk dragon leopard, were you calling me just now?" Ye Tian started, then answered, "Yes, master." The golden silk dragon leopard inclined its head. Only then did Ye Tian understand what that flash of light had been. The beast's soul light. When a ferocious beast voluntarily surrendered, it would relinquish its soul light and pledge itself to a lord. Once that soul light came under human control, the bond had a fatal imbalance. If the human master died, the bound beast would die with them. But if the beast died, the human suffered no consequence. Faced with that choice, the leopard had chosen survival. It had decided to recognize Ye Tian as its lord, not out of pride or shame, but simply because it preferred to live. Ye Tian felt a little bewildered at suddenly acquiring a pet, but it was a welcome turn of events, given his situation. The golden silk dragon leopard was no ordinary beast. It belonged to a top-tier bloodline, boasted supreme speed talent, decent endurance, and a basic healing aptitude. Its qualifications ranked it among the elite of the ferocious beasts. The golden silk dragon leopard was not just a powerful beast, it was the leader of a fierce beast clan. If Ye Tian could keep such a clan on his side in the little thousand-leaf forest, it would save him a great deal of trouble. "Golden silk dragon leopard, do you have a name?" Ye Tian asked. "Master, I don't have a name," the creature replied, shaking its massive head. Ye Tian thought for a moment. "Then you'll be Xiao Jin from now on." The moment the name left his lips, the leopard's whole posture changed. Xiao Jin brightened as if the name had warmed him. For a while, he even seemed to forget the pain of his wounds. Seeing that, Ye Tian quickly administered a healing elixir and focused his primary healing talent on the beast. Under the combined effects of the potion and Ye Tian's healing, Xiao Jin's injuries closed rapidly. An hour later, he was completely recovered. With the clan gathered around them, Xiao Jin turned to the other beasts and commanded the black wolf leopard to stand down. It would not attack Ye Tian. In that instant, Ye Tian realized he truly had a band of ferocious beasts at his command. "By the way, Xiao Jin," Ye Tian said, hope in his voice, "do you know where there are any treasures?" The little thousand-leaf forest was vast and full of resources, and any treasure Xiao Jin could point out might prove invaluable to a warrior. Ye Tian often went into the wild to hunt. Sometimes he collected medicinal herbs and sold them on the black market, but picking through the wilderness slowly meant his yield was always low. He rarely came across anything truly valuable. Xiao Jin, however, lived in the little Chiba forest and belonged to a tribe. He knew the area far better. "I do know about a treasure," Xiao Jin admitted. I'm not like ordinary ones of my kind. That's why I ate it. Ye Tian's heart leapt. From Xiaojin's words, US the item must be something that could enhance talent. The value of such a thing would be enormous. Xiaojin, take me there, he ordered. Xiaojin didn't hesitate. He led the way immediately. This was the advantage of having a beast swear fealty to its master. Without that bond, a fierce creature like Xiaojin would never submit so readily. It might even turn on a stranger. Once pledged, though, the beast became unwaveringly loyal, thinking of and protecting its master at all times. Xiaojin refused to let the others follow. Only it knew the location, it said, and its clan had no idea where it was. It didn't want to lead anyone here and risk creating another golden dragon or leopard like itself. No one should be given the chance to challenge its position as leader. After a while, Ye Tian followed Xiaojin down into the earth. The path wound in a series of twisting corridors before the man and the beast finally reached their destination. In a hollow chamber stood a small tree whose bark gleamed like burnished metal. One fruit hung from its branch, a smooth orb of pure gold threaded with veins of pale cyan. There were originally 2 fruits, Xiaojin said. I ate one. Only this one is left. It isn't ripe yet. You can't eat it yet. Ye Tian nodded, but his eyes never left the fruit. An urge rose inside him, a quiet, insistent voice that said he must eat it. He felt the pull, as if something in the fruit recognized him. Could this fruit enhance his talent? He wondered. But the thought that followed was practical and stubborn. His innate ability could copy itself again and again. There was no need to rely on some treasure to improve it. Using a rare fruit for that purpose would be a waste. Still, the fruit called to him. Ye Tian stood motionless, torn between restraint and appetite, while the dim light in the cave picked out the gold and cyan glow of the single, forbidden fruit. Ye Tian stared at the fruit, feeling a hunger that gnawed at him. The urge to tear into it right then filled him with instant regret at the thought of holding back. For a moment, he almost gave in. Eat, he breathed under his breath, then forced himself to think. In the end, he made a decision. He would not consume it now. Even if the fruit spoiled and was wasted, he would not regret waiting. If he trained and grew stronger first, he might be able to obtain something even better later. Xiaojin, how long until this fruit ripens? He asked his old companion. About 20 days and nights, master. Xiaojin patted his paws across the ground, counting off the time with practiced motions. 20 days, then. Stay here and keep watch. I'll spend that time on serious cultivation, Ye Tian murmured. For the next 20 days, he devoted himself to training. He swallowed large quantities of fierce beast blood as fuel for his cultivation, so he never had to worry about stagnation. Xiaojin continued hunting on Ye Tian's orders, killing ferocious beasts and bringing back more blood to supply him. With that steady supply and relentless focus, his progress accelerated rapidly. 45,000 units of power, Ye Tian exclaimed, sensing the surge in his strength. His sudden surge in cultivation owed almost entirely to the enormous quantities of fierce beast blood he'd consumed. He couldn't have counted it if he tried. Not even a powerful clan could have afforded that much. Ye Tian's eyes flicked to the fruit hanging from the little golden tree, Xiaojin. A thin vein of cyan along its skin was paling. The last sliver was about to turn to gold. Desire coiled tighter in his chest. A low rumble rolled through the air as countless strands of yuan qi poured into the golden fruit, completing its final metamorphosis. Under the watchful eyes of Ye Tian and Xiaojin, the fruit finished ripening at last, its surface shining with a warm, pure gold. Chapter 46. Ye Tian reached out and plucked the golden fruit. It was small, only about the size of a mouthful. For a moment he hesitated, then swallowed it without another thought. The fruit dissolved like water, rushing through his body. A sudden, overwhelming surge of energy exploded into his mind and immediately knocked him unconscious. While he lay senseless, lights began to bloom in the depths of his mind. They were points of color, reds, blues, greens, clustered around a single, brilliant golden mote at the center. That central gold was not actually produced by the fruit, it merely shared the same color. Had Ye Tian been awake to see it, he would have recognized the display for what it was, his talent marks. The golden point signified his most important aptitude, the ability to replicate. The incoming torrent of energy took on the shape of countless tiny golden fruits as it poured deeper into his psyche. The central golden light flared and ravenously absorbed the influx, drawing the power into itself as Ye Tian remained unconscious. The golden point of light swelled and brightened so rapidly that the change was obvious to the naked eye. Its fluctuations grew wilder and more intense. It was evolving, undergoing a metamorphosis, ascending. When Ye Tian came to, he felt a mix of surprise and unease. Fortunately, they were in a safe place. If he'd absorbed the golden fruit out in the open, falling into a coma during this transformation could have been deadly. He pushed himself up and saw Xiaojin lying a little way off. "You were out cold too when you ate it?" Ye Tian asked. "Comatose," Xiaojin answered honestly. "You didn't warn me?" Ye Tian rolled his eyes and scolded. "Master, you didn't ask!" Xiaojin protested, looking a bit aggrieved. Ye Tian couldn't really blame him. Xiaojin was clever, but he wasn't human. Ye Tian let out a small smile and focused his mind. View talent. At the command, his talent information unfolded before him. Ye Tian, human. Cultivation talent, advanced speed talent, top knife talent, medium shadow talent, primary healing talent, top strength talent, advanced. Well, my talent didn't change after all? He felt a flicker of surprise, quickly followed by disappointment. The golden fruit had looked extraordinary. After all, Xiaojin's talent had shot up to a top-tier bloodline level at once. Ye Tian had hoped the fruit would do something similar for him, especially to his cultivation talent, which was already high enough that a promotion to the top seemed reasonable. Maybe, he thought, it had boosted some other ability instead. He checked each talent carefully. Nothing. Every rating remained exactly as before. Then he examined his own body more closely. That's when he noticed a real difference. His spirit had strengthened. A faint spiritual force now flowed through him, allowing him to sense his surroundings within a 10-meter radius. It wasn't as far-reaching as the great warrior's 20-meter spiritual awareness, but it still exceeded his previous limits. Ye Tian had never heard of anyone whose spiritual power had reached the elite warrior level. That alone was something to be proud of. So when he asked about Xiaojin and learned that Xiaojin's spiritual power already extended 30 meters, he was floored. Of course, Ye Tian understood why. Xiaojin was in a higher realm. Once Ye Tian himself reached the peak of the elite warrior rank, his spiritual power would naturally grow too. He noticed one small change in himself right away. His copying talent had expanded. He could now sense the talents of others within a 50-meter radius, which made it much easier to read people or ferocious beasts nearby. Still, he couldn't help feeling a little down. Xiaojin had soared after eating the golden fruit, while Ye Tian had only awakened some spiritual power and gained a slight increase in his copying radius. It wasn't nearly as impressive. In the end, though, it was still something. A little bonus. A free gain wasn't something to complain about. We still have 10 days to copy. The talent. Stay the full 10 days before going back, Ye Tian decided. For those 10 days, he and Xiaojin hunted together, and they aimed higher than before. Instead of medium beasts, they went after high-level, ferocious creatures. Xiaojin explained that Little Chiba Forest was fiercely territorial. Each area had an overlord, so once you knew the boundaries, it wasn't hard to find the big ones. With one man and one beast working in concert, the high-level predators were no match. They were cut down without much trouble. By their agreement, Ye Tian wanted only the blood of the high-level beasts, while Xiaojin insisted on keeping the corpses. 10 days flew by. When it was over, Ye Tian looked at the small pool of collected blood and felt a rush of satisfaction. 1,600 portions of high-level beast blood. This will be more than enough for my cultivation, he exclaimed. That excitement didn't last long. Almost immediately, his expression clouded with worry. There was too much of the beast's blood. He couldn't take it all. The little kettle strapped to his body couldn't hold more than a trickle, so he managed to gather only a fraction of it. He muttered to himself, a storage bag would be so much more convenient. Ye Tian sighed. Another day had passed, and his copying talent had finally recharged. He was ready to copy Xiaojin's endurance talent. It wasn't that he didn't want other talents, he simply hadn't run into a good one. Beasts are more likely than humans to carry talents, but the truly special ones are rare. Most are mediocre or basic, useless to him. Compared with that, Xiao Jin's mid-level endurance at least had some value. He started toward Xiao Jin, then suddenly froze. On his retinal display, Xiao Jin's talent icons were visible. Aside from a top-speed talent, every other talent showed a duplicate button. That sight was painfully familiar. A duplicate button meant he could copy it. The problem was, he hadn't even touched Xiao Jin yet. Isn't it supposed to require contact? Ye Tian breathed, chest tight, frozen between disbelief and a rising urgency. He finally understood why he'd eaten the golden fruit. His talent hadn't failed to change. It had evolved in a way he hadn't noticed. His replication ability had metamorphosed. The act of copying itself had become a talent. Ye Tianming thought it through. The replication talent was no longer limited to physical contact. He could copy things at a distance, essentially in the air. That was far more convenient than before. Previously, when he tried to copy a person's ability, he sometimes ran into incredible talents, but couldn't duplicate them simply because he couldn't touch the owner, a constant frustration. That problem was gone. With that in mind, there was no rush to grab Xiao Jin's endurance skill. Endurance wasn't terribly useful anyway. If he ran into a high-level cultivation talent at the coastal base, he could copy it from nearby and perhaps even refine it into a top-tier cultivation ability. For example, Lin Wanli of the Lin family was a known high-level cultivation talent. Ye Tianming wouldn't have to make contact with him at all. Being close would be enough to copy it. I don't see the full chapter, only a single sentence. Please paste the chapter you want rewritten, or attach it in pieces if it's long, and I'll produce a polished, idiomatic English version that preserves all plot points, characters, and details. As a quick example, here's a polished rewrite of the sentence you already provided. Consequently, Ye Tian was prepared to stop imitating Xiao Jin. Tell me any additional preferences, US or UK spelling, preserve original names, keep the original tone, expand awkward bits, etc., and I'll get started as soon as you paste the chapter. Chapter 47. Xiao Jin, stay here, Ye Tian instructed. If you have time, gather more medicinal herbs and beast blood. Put the beast blood into the blood pool, but remember, keep high-level beast blood separate from mid-level beast blood. Understood, Master, Xiao Jin replied and bowed. Ye Tian had considered bringing Xiao Jin back to the coastal base, but in the end, he decided against it. Xiao Jin was huge and unmistakably a feral beast, although the coastal base did keep beasts for display, and some influential families maintained ornamental feral beasts. A mid-level creature, especially a rare one like a golden silk dragon leopard, would draw too much attention. Bringing Xiao Jin in could create more trouble than it was worth. Besides, Xiao Jin wasn't as strong as Ye Tian and couldn't serve as a reliable protector. It was far safer for him to remain in the Shaoqianye forest, where he could continue gathering beast blood and medicinal materials. That way, Ye Tian wouldn't have to worry about running short of beast blood in the future. Ye Tian strapped the last of his gear into place and shouldered a heavy pack containing roughly 100 vials of high-grade beast blood and a large satchel of medicinal herbs. With Xiao Jin walking beside him as an escort, he left the little thousand-leaf forest. About 8 miles from the seaside base, a hunting squad was combing the area, faces set and serious. The team wasn't particularly powerful. At best, the strongest among them was only in the late stage of the martial realm. "Boss, over there! Someone's coming," one warrior called, pointing at a lone figure approaching in the distance. "He's young, carrying a lot." The captain squinted and watched the youth draw closer. "Should we take him?" another man asked eagerly. The captain hesitated. The boy didn't look like much, too young to be formidable. Even if he was a cultivator, he was probably only newly entered into the martial realm. "Captain, are you worried he has powerful backing?" one of the Iron Tooth men said. "We all know the fighters from Iron Tooth Base. There wouldn't be a kid like this among them. He's probably from the coastal base. Even if he does have some support there, are you really going to let a nobody from the coastal base intimidate us?" "Let's vote on it," another added. "As long as we don't kill him, nobody will make a fuss. We came away with nothing today. We can't go back empty-handed." Pressed by his men, the captain gritted his teeth. Fine. Votes carried. They had done this sort of thing before, always cautious, always looking for easy prey. This time was a little riskier, but if it paid off, the haul would be worth it. The hunting squad surged forward and quickly closed in around the young man. "Hand everything over," the captain barked. The youth, Ye Tian, stared at them in stunned silence. He hadn't expected them to be so brazen. How could they think to rob him like this? Ye Tian's spiritual sense let him measure their strength at a glance. They were all true warriors, comparable to members of the Windwolf hunting squad, but to him they were nothing more than ants. "Are you really going to rob me?" Ye Tian asked coldly. The captain sneered. "If you don't want to suffer, hand everything over." He leveled his knife, and the blade began to glow faintly as Yuan force poured into it, a clear sign he meant to strike. Ye Tian's blade moved before they could react. None of the men saw his motion. They only felt a sudden, searing pain in their hands. Weapons slipped from numb, useless fingers and clattered to the ground. "Ah, my hand! My hand! It's breaking! I don't want to be crippled." Ye Tian had not intended to maim them for life, but he did break their tendons and partially shatter some wrist bones. In a previous life, such injuries would have meant permanent crippling. In this era, they could be healed with medicine, but recovery would take time. As it stood, these warriors would be unable to use their hands effectively for months. The captain of the hunting squad clenched his burning hands and stared at Ye Tian with raw fear. Only now did he understand. This young man was no ordinary fighter. He was far more powerful. So fast the captain hadn't even seen him move. That kind of speed, that kind of power, was terrifying. "Tell me," Ye Tian asked, "how's the coastal base?" He'd been away for over a month and wanted the situation there immediately. The hunting squad didn't dare withhold anything. The captain hurriedly recounted what had happened. As Ye Tian listened, his expression hardened. In just the past month, the coastal base had changed drastically, and there was worse news. Iron Tooth Base was gone. It had been annihilated by ferocious beasts. Hundreds of thousands had died. Only about 100,000 people had managed to reach the coastal base alive. Of those survivors, nearly 10,000 were warriors. The remainder were mostly the families of those fighters. The ordinary civilians of Iron Tooth had had no chance to escape. By now, 100,000 people from Iron Tooth Base had relocated to the coastal settlement. Beyond the original town, entire neighborhoods were being rebuilt, and work had already begun on an outer city wall. It was obvious. Iron Tooth intended to make this place their new home. At the same time, the Lin family of Linhai Base and the leadership of Tiea Base had reached an arrangement. The people of Tiea would be absorbed into Linhai, but administrative control would remain firmly in the hands of the Lin family. Warriors and ordinary citizens from Iron Tooth were granted the same rights as the original coastal residents. "So the Lin family is in charge now?" someone asked. Ye Tian couldn't help but laugh. It was only nominal authority, no match for Iron Tooth's real strength. How could the Lin family possibly control the seasoned warriors and even sect masters who had come with Iron Tooth? The agreement was simply a face-saving formality. The true power now lay with Iron Tooth's top command. For Ye Tian, it made no difference. He had no intention of getting drawn into their power struggles. He thought it probably wouldn't be long before he took Ye Yu to the main base and left this little seaside outpost behind. "Let's go," he ordered. The hunting party scattered at once, spilling away in a hurried, scrambling retreat, clearly afraid he might change his mind if they hesitated. Ye Tian stayed unflustered and led them back to the coastal base. The rest of the trip was uneventful. When he stepped inside the base, he immediately noticed how different it was. There were more warriors now, more civilians, and the streets were crowded and lively as if the whole place had come to life. It felt like coming home. "Brother, you're finally back!" Ye Yu threw himself at him the moment he saw Ye Tian, his small face bright with relief and longing. Chapter 48. Sister, have you been slacking off lately? Ye Tian ruffled Ye Yu's small head, teasing him. Ye Yu answered solemnly, "Xiao Yu isn't lazy. I've been working hard on my cultivation. I can lift 300 pounds now." In just over a month, he'd increased his strength to 300 pounds, an unusually fast advance for someone of middling talent. Ye Tian knew most of the credit went to the fierce beast blood. Without it, Ye Yu couldn't have progressed so quickly. "Have you run into any trouble recently?" he asked. Ye shook his head. No one's bothering me, but someone's been looking for you, brother. Who? Ye Tian asked, frowning. I don't know him personally, but he was very arrogant. From how he introduced himself, he seemed to be a genius from Iron Tooth Base, called Sun Feng. Ye thought for a moment and repeated, Iron Tooth Base, Sun Feng. Ye Tian made a mental note of the name. He then gathered the medicinal herbs and the vials of high-grade fierce beast blood and put them away in the house's secure storage. After that, he prepared to go out alone. Come out! Ye Tian called toward the corner nearby. Wow! Came an astonished exclamation in answer. A figure slipped out of the shadows, a member of the Wind Wolf hunting squad. Lord Ye Tian, he called, bowing with respectful haste. There's someone who wants to see your captain. He asked that I bring him to him. Ye Tian nodded. He'd returned mainly to find out about a man named Sun Feng, who had shown up at the Iron Tooth Base while Ye Tian was away and had behaved with brazen arrogance. Ye Tian didn't know Sun Feng personally, so he wanted to learn what he could, and the Wind Wolf squad would likely have some information. The squad man led him down the corridor, and soon Ye Tian stood before the Wind Wolf himself. Ye Tian, you're finally back, the Wind Wolf said, exhaling in obvious relief. Ye Tian had been gone a long time. The captain had even feared something had happened to him. Wind Wolf, Ye Tian said without preamble, I heard that after I left, a man named Sun Feng came asking for me. What do you know about him? The Wind Wolf frowned, then nodded. Yes, Sun Feng is from the Iron Tooth Base, one of their prodigies, though he isn't considered on the same level as the geniuses from Linhai Base. He's said to have a high-grade cultivation aptitude, and his current strength has reached the mid-tier of elite martial artists. After the Iron Tooth Base was absorbed into Linhai Base, Sun Feng went on a rampage through the younger ranks. He issued challenges everywhere, knocking off a string of mid-level cultivators and even beating several veteran martial artists. Word spread quickly. He was ruthless and dangerous. Somehow Sun Feng heard about Ye Tian and came looking for him to issue a challenge, but Ye Tian wasn't home, so the man left in frustration. That's what happened, Wind Wolf said. Be careful, Ye Tian. Sun Feng hits hard. The people he defeats are often left badly injured and unable to train for months. And he's not acting alone. He's backed by a peak-rank warrior. Even fighters stronger than Sun Feng don't dare face him, for fear of offending his patron. I'll keep that in mind, Ye Tian answered, but he wasn't worried. Ye Tian understood why the Wind Wolf was worried. Sun Feng was a second-generation martial scion, born into power and privilege. Those he'd beaten never dared strike back. They simply accepted defeat, and that only fed Sun Feng's arrogance. Everyone else feared him, and Sun Feng feared no one. Even a peak-rank grandmaster sent to challenge him would not be his match. After parting ways with the Wind Wolf, Ye Tian returned to his villa and resumed his cultivation. He had more than enough blood from high-level fierce beasts. Resources were never a concern. Practicing every day, he could feel his strength increasing quickly, and that rapid improvement obsessed him. Nothing interested him more than getting stronger. His training, however, was interrupted. A brazen voice called from outside, the villa. Ye Tian, I know you're back. Come out and fight me. Reluctantly ending his session, Ye Tian pushed open the door and stepped out. Who are you? He asked coldly, eyeing the young man standing not far away. He half suspected the answer already, but still wanted to hear it. Sun Feng, one of the 4 great geniuses of Iron Tooth Base. Your name is Ye Tian, right? I heard you're also a promising cultivator. Let's spar and see whose strength is greater, Sun Feng said, brimming with confidence. Ye Tian understood Sun Feng's type well. If he refused, Sun Feng wouldn't just walk away, he'd badger him, possibly even escalate things. To avoid that, Ye Tian agreed without hesitation. If he showed any reluctance, Sun Feng would only push harder. All right, a test is fine, Ye Tian said, but a plain spar is boring. I'll be more interested if there's a wager. A wager? Sun Feng's eyes brightened. What do you want to stake? A bronze-grade sword technique, Ye Tian answered calmly. Do you dare bet against it? A bronze-grade sword technique? Sun Feng's excitement was obvious. He coveted techniques like that. The better the prize, the better. Fine, I accept. He hurriedly produced a bronze-grade sword manual of his own and slapped it down as his stake, afraid Ye Tian might change his mind. Sun Feng had no idea what was going through Ye Tian's mind. The moment Sun Feng agreed to the wager, Ye Tian merely brushed a fingertip along the corner of his mouth and gave a dark little smile. Then, deliberately, he withdrew a bronze-ranked sword technique as his stake. He had a reason. Ye Tian had already sized up Sun Feng's aptitude. Name Sun Feng, cultivation talent, advanced sword aptitude. Middle Sun Feng's sword aptitude was only middling. He wasn't exactly a prodigy of the blade. That made a bronze-ranked sword technique extremely valuable to him. Given Sun Feng's status, it was likely he could acquire such a technique, but it would still be a major asset. Who would part with a bronze-ranked sword skill lightly? Since you accepted the bet, let's state our wagers, Sun Feng said first, stepping forward with an air of confidence as he revealed his own bronze technique. My bronze sword skill is called Qingfeng Chop. It's an offensive technique that multiplies attack power. When mastered to perfection, it can boost one's attack sixfold. Even if the user only reaches the Dacheng realm, it still triples their attack. He fixed Ye Tian with a challenging look. So, what is your bronze sword technique? At that question, Ye Tian's heart tightened. He had been searching for a speed-boosting blade technique for a long time and never found one. He hadn't expected Sun Feng to possess a bronze-level technique that increased attack speed. If he could obtain a technique like that, his combat effectiveness would shoot through the roof. My bronze-level blade technique is called shadow killing, Sun Feng said. It's a bronze-level skill that speeds up the blade. At its peak, it can make the blade move 5 or 6 times faster. This technique focuses on killing with a single strike. It's hard to defend against. A bronze-level speed technique, a fast blade skill. I don't have anything like that. That would be a huge gain, Ye Tian thought, eyes lighting up. Sun Feng was already confident, so sure of himself that he didn't believe he could lose. When shall we start? Ye Tian asked. My copy of the bronze-level manual isn't here right now, and a duel between elites can be destructive. Let's meet in Huiming Square at 10 tomorrow morning, Sun Feng proposed. Agreed, Ye Tian nodded. Chapter 49. Watching Sun Feng walk away, Ye Tian couldn't help but smile ruefully. Sun Feng really was generous. He hadn't only handed over a bronze-tier attack sword technique, he'd also given him an advanced cultivation talent. While they'd been talking, Ye Tian had quietly copied that cultivation talent. He had wanted to copy the mid-level sword talent too, but when forced to choose between the two, Ye Tian had gone for the cultivation gift. His own cultivation talent was already at its limit, on the verge of becoming a top-tier gift, so gaining the advanced cultivation talent would almost certainly push it over the edge and upgrade it. The mid-level sword talent, by contrast, might not transform or improve at all. He knew which was the wiser choice. Back inside the house, Ye Tian began to fuse the newly copied cultivation talent. This time, the process was surprisingly smooth. No agonizing pain, just a light sheen of sweat and a quiet pulling sensation as the talent merged with his own. Ye Tian cultivation talent, top speed. Talent, top knife. Talent, medium shadow talent, primary healing talent, top strength talent, advanced. When he saw that his cultivation talent had been ranked top, Ye Tian couldn't contain his excitement. Top cultivation talent meant everything. If he kept cultivating, reaching the Grandmaster realm would be all but certain. By contrast, anyone with less than top talent had only a 1 or 2% chance of ever becoming a Grandmaster. Even if they managed it, their progress usually stalled afterward, and it was extremely difficult to improve further. Top talent was different. With it, one could attain Grandmaster in the early, middle, or even late stages of life without much trouble. Only when attempting to rise beyond that realm would serious bottlenecks appear. And even then, there remained a small chance of breaking through to an even higher level. With top cultivation talent, there's no need to worry about qualifications before the Grandmaster realm. Ye Tian had tested the effect of the top cultivation talent and found it far superior to the high cultivation type, roughly twice as powerful on its own. If he combined it with the intermediate elemental force forging body method and a high-grade fierce beast's blood, the combined benefit could be as much as threefold. After all, the higher the talent, the more efficiently the fierce beast blood could be used. Judging by the results, Ye Tian was confident he could reach the elite martial arts extreme level within 2 months, a physical strength of 100,000 jin. The next morning, before 10, Ye Tian went to Huiming Plaza. The seafront complex was large and busy, a popular shopping area at the base and even home to a discreet black market entrance. When he arrived, the square was packed, mostly martial artists. "Ye Tian, you're finally here." Sun Feng came up with a smile. Ye Tian scanned the crowd. "Why are there so many people?" he asked, curious. There shouldn't have been this many people here. The crowd of martial artists clustered around the arena could only mean one thing. Sun Feng had publicized the match. "Nothing special," Sun Feng said lightly when someone asked. "I only announced our fight." It wasn't humility. He craved fame. That was why he'd thrown down challenges everywhere. He didn't care that he came off as arrogant toward the warriors from the coastal base. In his mind, the so-called prodigies of the coastal base were overrated. They wouldn't even clear the low bar for genius at Iron Tooth Base. Beating their best and putting their fighters in their place would only help Iron Tooth extend its influence over the coast. Aside from Ye Tian, he had already steamrolled the other rising stars from Linhai. This duel had to be spectacular. "Bet on it," Sun Feng called out, eager to raise the stakes. He hurried to make the wager before the match began, not because he feared Ye Tian, but because he wanted to ensure Ye Tian actually wielded a bronze-level sword technique. Ye Tian didn't hesitate. He produced a worn, secret manual, the bronze-level sword art known as shadow killing. Sun Feng smiled and revealed his own manual in reply, the bronze-level sword technique Qingfeng Chop. They compared their cheat sheets carefully. A quick glance couldn't steal a blade technique. The moves were too intricate, the manuals crammed with diagrams, each illustration holding some secret of the bronze-level blade arts. No matter how sharp your memory, you still had to keep consulting the secret books to learn a technique properly. That was why it was so hard to reduce every blade move to a simple cheat sheet, and why these skills hadn't become common knowledge. "The manuals are authentic. Begin," an official announced. Ye Tian and Sun Feng stood facing each other in the center of Huiming Square, while the others fell back and gave them room. Around the perimeter, dozens of martial artists watched and whispered. "Who is Ye Tian?" someone murmured. "Is he one of the elites?" They say Ye Tian's a high-level talent. He's already an elite martial artist, but he's always kept a low profile, so nobody really knows exactly how strong he is. Ye Tian might be talented, but Sun Feng is a high-level talent too. He's much older than Ye Tian, so his strength has to be greater. There shouldn't even be any doubt about this match. "I agree. Sun Feng's got to win. He's a swordsman, and he's brought the bronze-grade sword technique Qingfeng Slash up to the Dacheng realm. He can release 3 times his normal attack power." 3 times? To put it in numbers, if his base strength is 50,000 jin, he can unleash an attack power of 150,000 jin. The elite fighters from our coastal base don't stand a chance against that. The truly great martial artists wouldn't even bother to step into the ring with him. Who could possibly beat Sun Feng? Yeah, Ye Tian's chances are basically nil. Most of the crowd agreed. Ye Tian's prospects looked bleak. Only a handful of people still dared to hope. Those few were members of the Wind Wolf hunting squad. "Captain, does Lord Ye Tian have any chance of winning?" a warrior from the Wind Wolf hunting squad asked in a low voice. "He should," the captain replied, "but it won't be easy. Sun Feng's offense rivals that of a great martial artist. Ye Tian's speed and swordsmanship are extraordinary, but his margin isn't large. It's likely to be a brutal fight." The Wind Wolf's assessment was based on everything they knew of Ye Tian, yet none of them could have guessed that Ye Tian's true strength had already surpassed the limits of a great martial artist. The match began. With a shout, Sun Feng charged like a gale, raising his blade and slashing with brutal force. A wind knife cut toward Ye Tian. Blessed by Yuan Li, the strike carried the equivalent of 300,000 jin of force. The blow wasn't especially fast, but its power made it nearly impossible for anyone below the great martial realm to dodge. Then the unthinkable happened. Ye Tian vanished. Bijong's wind knife swept the ground, gouging a jagged fissure more than 10 meters long. Countless bluestone slabs exploded into rubble. "Not good," Sun Feng thought, and as he moved to evade, he felt a blade press cold against his throat. Cold sweat broke out over him. He hadn't seen Ye Tian move, hadn't noticed when Ye Tian had slipped to his side. It was terrifying. Sun Feng understood immediately what that meant. If Ye Tian chose to, a single stroke would be enough to kill him. He must possess an extraordinary talent for speed. Chapter 50. Ye Tian pressed the blade to Sun Feng's throat and asked flatly, "Yield?" Sun Feng made a helpless sound and nodded. "I yield." He had fought well, only an elite martial artist by rank. His offensive power had been pushed up to the great martial artist level by the sword technique's blessing, but his defense never truly reached that height. His Yuanli protective body could not stop Ye Tian's blade. The neck is a vulnerable spot, and there was no way for him to resist the Yuanbing sword in that position. "Hand over the bronze-level sword technique, the Qingfeng slashing secret book," Ye Tian demanded. Sun Feng's face went cold. A hard, iron-blue glare settled in his eyes. "You mean to take my bronze-level sword art?" he said. "Don't say I didn't warn you." Bronze-level sword techniques were not trivial. A martial artist without an affinity for the sword might shrug them off, but anyone with sword talent prized those manuals. They were valuable commodities. Some practitioners would spend tens of millions just to obtain a single bronze-level sword skill. Sun Feng didn't care about losing a bronze-ranked sword technique. Handing the manual to Ye Tian would only cost him a little in material terms. What stung was his pride. This was a loss of face, not just for him, but for the Iron Tooth base. A prodigy from a mid-sized base had come to the small base and been beaten by its upstart genius. If that got around, his reputation would be ruined. His family would be humiliated before the other clans. That was why he hated Ye Tian so fiercely. "Bring it," Ye Tian said coldly. "Here." With a snarl, Sun Feng tossed the Qingfeng chopper secret manual aside and fixed Ye Tian with a murderous glare, as if daring him to make a move. Ye Tian picked up the book without ceremony, that in a good mood. Sun Feng's threat didn't faze him. If Sun Feng chose to make trouble, he'd be the one to regret it. As the fight ended, the other martial artists drifted away, whispering the news and carrying the story of the upset through the crowd. Tomorrow, it was certain the whole coastal base would be talking about Ye Tian's confrontation with Sun Feng. His reputation would spread fast. People would be whispering his name in every barracks and training hall. Windwolf and the others came over soon after. "Windwolf, you made it!" Ye Tian greeted them with a smile. Windwolf looked at him soberly. "Be careful, Ye Tian. Sun Feng lost a lot of face today. He's not the kind to let that go quietly. He might look for revenge." Ye Tian only nodded. "I know," he said. "I've got a plan." Windwolf didn't press further. There was only so much he could do besides warn a friend. After they left, Ye Tian returned home and dove into practice. He focused on the Qingfeng slash, a bronze-grade sword technique notoriously difficult to grasp. With only average talent for swordsmanship, Ye Tian could reasonably expect to advance the Qingfeng slash to the great achievement realm, the same level Sun Feng had reached. Pushing it past that into the perfection realm, however, would be extremely hard. That kind of breakthrough required a rare opportunity, a profound enlightenment in sword intent, or a sudden improvement to the technique itself. For now, all he could do was train and wait. Ye Tian still had one major cultivation task ahead of him, mastering the Qingfeng chop. As he practiced day and night, word of his latest battle spread throughout the Linhai base. The headline was impossible to ignore. He defeated Sun Feng in seconds. Even veteran great martial artists would find such a record hard to achieve. Yet Ye Tian had done it. When Lin Wanli, head of the Lin family, heard the news, he was stunned. "His speed is incredible," he thought. "Maybe I underestimated him. Perhaps Ye Tian has at least middling speed talent, maybe even high-speed talent." With that gift, Ye Tian had already surpassed the rank-and-file elite martial artists and could even hold his own against great martial artists. Still, Lin Wanli's excitement was tempered by worry. The Sun family lie was not one to be trifled with. Whether Ye Tian could withstand their revenge remained to be seen. Lin Wanli wanted to help the young genius push back the Sun family, but he dared not. The Sun family's strength far outmatched the Lin family's. He could only sigh and hope Ye Tian's talent and determination would be enough. Although the Sun family had no grandmaster, they were far from weak. They counted 2 peak-level great martial masters and 8 other great martial artists among their ranks. Ye Tian had faced those peak fighters before and been finished by a single move in an instant. Sword talent ran in the family. The sons almost never married outside their clan, preferring internal matches to preserve the bloodline. That practice, they said, increased the chances of producing genuine sword prodigies. But the same inbreeding carried a darker cost. Rumors whispered that the clan produced its share of mental illness and physical disabilities, and that those considered defective were quietly executed. A family willing to be so ruthless would not let Ye Tian go without a fight. In Iron Tooth Base, the Sun family ranked among the top 5 great houses. Against that kind of strength, where could the Lin family find the courage to resist? It was easy to believe that a single one of the Sun family's peak masters could sweep the entire Lin household. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Sun family prepared to act. Sun Feng smashed the last chair against the wall and sank to his knees amid a scatter of splinters and overturned tables. He had even taken a few of his subordinates to task, hard enough to leave bruises, just so he could vent the fury that boiled under his skin. "Feng," a voice called. A middle-aged man stepped inside, surveyed the wreckage with a frown, and said quietly, "Still stewing over that failed test?" The man was Sun Qinghe, Sun Feng's father. Though only an early-stage grand martial artist, Sun Qinghe's natural affinity for the sword made him a fearsome opponent. His skill and composure put him on a level comparable to many late-stage grand martial artists. Sun Feng pushed himself to his feet and forced a breath. "Father." He moved toward him and, for a moment, steadied his voice. Then the old anger flared again. "I can't let Ye Tian get away with this. I want him dead. Will you help me?" He asked because he knew his own limits. He didn't have the strength to kill Ye Tian himself, and he couldn't risk calling in the Sun clan's great warriors for something so personal. His only option was his father. No, Sun Qinghe's refusal was simple and final. Sun Feng stared, baffled. Why? Ye Tian knew the truth all too well. No matter how promising his cultivation talent might be, until he actually grew stronger, he was nothing but an insect before the Sun family. If Sun Qinghe decided to move against him, he would be dead without a chance. "Because now is a very sensitive time," Sun Qinghe said. "We've become part of the Linhai base, but many people there still see us as outsiders. Our foothold here isn't secure. If we kill someone from the Linhai base on our first day, even if the Lin family ignores it, what will the other martial artists think? It could bring trouble from all sides and seriously set back the family's development." "Then we just let Ye Tian go?" Sun Feng asked, displeasure clear in his voice. "No." Sun Qinghe's tone was firm. "Ye Tian has embarrassed the Sun family. We won't forget or forgive that. But we can't act rashly right now. For the next few months, we must stay low and consolidate our position in the coastal base. Once the family's foothold is solid, then we will deal with Ye Tian." "Fine," Sun Feng muttered, though his face was dark. A few months wasn't long. In his view, little would change in that time. Neither Sun Feng nor Sun Qinghe had expected Ye Tian to rise in just a few months to the level of a top martial artist. Time drifted by slowly, and the coastal base settled into an unusual, almost uneasy calm. After 10 days of non-stop training, Ye Tian suddenly felt the quietness. He frowned, surprised. "The Sun family hasn't bothered me?" he muttered, unable to hide the strange mix of relief and suspicion. Chapter 51. The Sun family hadn't come looking for a fight, but Ye Tian didn't let his guard down. He kept asking questions and gathering information, and the more he learned, the more he had to admit how powerful they were. To him, they weren't an enemy so much as a living handbook, a concentrated source of experience and rare techniques. What surprised him most was how many of the Sun family cultivated sword talents. It was astonishing. Ye Tian already knew his own parents possessed unusual gifts, and that such talents could be inherited, but he hadn't expected the Sun clan to go so far as to keep those talents tightly within the bloodline, even arranging marriages inside the family to preserve and concentrate their abilities. Ye Tian thought things through. His cultivation talent was already at the top tier. Copying some higher cultivation aptitude wouldn't do him much good. What he needed was a sword talent he could meld with his own. If he could copy one of the Sun family's sword talents, perhaps he could trigger a metamorphosis and upgrade his own sword skill to a higher form. He waited, watched, and after 20 more days, he finally found an opening. While Sun Feng was out wandering, Ye Tian slipped in and secretly copied a mid-grade sword talent from the Sun family's records. The last replication fusion attempt had failed to trigger any change in Ye Tian's sword talent. Still, he didn't give up. A month later, he found another opportunity. This time, the source was a Sun family teenager, not yet 15 and not yet cultivated, but with an intermediate sword talent that could be copied. Ye Tian replicated the boy's medium sword skill and initiated another fusion. This time, the fusion succeeded. When he checked his status afterward, his sword talent read, Advanced. Seeing the advanced level sword talent filled him with excitement. With this upgrade, he finally had a high-tier sword aptitude capable of guiding his bronze-level sword technique to perfection. If he could perfect that bronze technique, his combat power would change dramatically. There was, however, a catch. To complete a bronze-level sword technique, one had to reach the realm of sword intent. Up until now, the ceiling of his talent had kept him trapped at the realm of sword perfection. He hadn't been able to perceive even the faintest trace of sword intent. This new advancement might finally give him the opening he needed. Now that his blade technique had been upgraded, the possibility of forming true sword intent at last existed. Ye Tian sat cross-legged, took the dagger in both hands, and shut his eyes. Enlightenment, he murmured inwardly. In his mind, the blade came alive. It drew him into a strange, wondrous realm, the world of the blade itself. Time stretched and lost all meaning. Ye Tian drifted deeper into that inner landscape until, without warning, a flash of insight struck him. His comprehension of the sword realm leapt forward. A thin strand of blade intent manifested on his body. Sword intent was the will of the blade, the condensation of sword momentum to its absolute extreme, perceived and shaped within the sword realm. That faint wisp was Ye Tian's first genuine realization of it. Though weak and fragile, that thread of intent marked his formal entry into the sword intent realm. For the next several days, he poured everything into cultivating and refining that intent, temporarily setting aside all other branches of his cultivation. Because his cultivation had already reached the peak of the elite warrior realm, his physical strength had topped out at 100,000 pounds. If he broke through now, he would become a great martial artist. But he didn't want to push forward yet. His progress had been so fast that his bodily refinement wasn't truly finished. Even though his strength had hit the elite warrior limit, his flesh and bones, his skin and blood, still needed deeper tempering. Ye Tian planned to refine them again so his foundation would be rock solid. He was certain doing so would pay off. If he rushed into greater power without a stable base, it wouldn't hold. 5 days passed. Ye Tian completed a session of enlightenment on blade meaning. He exhaled and murmured, Blade intent? Not bad. The realm of blade intent had its own subtle divisions, the initial entry of blade intent, the blade intent itself, and then progressive stages where the emphasis shifts from raw intent toward refined meaning, moving from roughly 30% intent, 70% meaning, to 10% intent, 90% meaning, and finally into pure blade meaning. Understanding sword intent proved far harder than Ye Tian had expected. Even with his natural talent for swordsmanship, it was unrealistic to expect rapid advancement through the sword intent realm. He felt clearly that once his sword intent reached a single point, the pace of enlightenment slowed dramatically. For now, it wasn't cost-effective to throw everything into sword intent. 1 point would suffice. So he turned his attention to 2 bronze-grade sword techniques he already knew well, Shadow Kill and the Qingfeng Slash. Both had been cultivated to the peak of the Dasheng, Great Achievement realm, and were only a step away from entering the Perfection realm. With his sword intent stabilized, nothing now blocked their final breakthrough. Shadow Kill reached perfection in a single day. A little over half a day later, Qingfeng Slash followed suit. With both bronze-level sword skills elevated to the Perfection realm, Ye Tian began to reassess his overall combat strength. Ye Tian ran the numbers in his head. His raw physical strength was already at 100,000 kilograms. With higher level amplification, he could push it to 1,000,000 kilograms, the pinnacle of a great martial artist. With the Qingfeng chopper's 6-fold attack multiplier, his striking power would be the equivalent of 6,000,000 kilograms of force, putting him on par with a grandmaster's offensive power and superior to most ordinary grandmasters. His speed had reached 12 times the speed of sound, beyond the limit of a great martial artist and comparable to grandmaster-level speed. Putting it all together, Ye Tian figured that aside from a relative weakness in defense, he was basically the equal of a sect master. That defensive shortcoming was mitigated by an exceptional healing talent. Even if he took heavy damage, he would recover quickly. Even if I face a true sect master powerhouse, I won't be at a total disadvantage, he thought confidently. He hadn't yet found a suitable defensive talent to plug the gap, but he had no doubt that when he did, the flaw would be fixed. According to his calculations, in another month Ye Tian would have refined his entire body to the peak. And then he could safely ascend to the rank of great martial artist. The thought excited him. If he did reach that level, his combat strength would explode. He suspected even many sect masters wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from him. Meanwhile, the Sun family had been quietly growing stronger over the past few months. They'd bought up shops, expanded their assets, and opened a steady resource supply line centered on their coastal base. With that backing, Sun Feng felt the moment to act had come. He went straight to his father, unable to hide his urgency. "Father, shouldn't we move against Ye Tian now?" "In 3 days," Sun Qinghe replied coldly. "I will go and kill Ye Tian myself." "Thank you, father," Sun Feng cried, elated. He could already see the end of Ye Tian in his imagination and broke into a delighted laugh. Chapter 52. Sun Feng knew his father's strength well. Although he was only an early-stage great martial artist, his base physical power already reached 150,000 jin, 1 jin, 2.5 kilograms, and he possessed a medium-grade sword talent. He had pushed 2 bronze-level sword techniques to the peak of the Dacheng realm and wielded a medium-tier Yuan Bing sword. The combination of those sword skills and the weapon amplified his power roughly 4-fold, effectively raising him to 600,000 jin. With further Yuan energy enhancement, his strikes could reach the equivalent of 1.2 million jin. By comparison, Sun Feng could only muster an attack power of about 300,000 jin, far weaker. But the gap between an elite warrior and a great martial artist wasn't only about raw numbers. The greats were much faster and far more resilient. Their defensive capabilities made them disproportionately dangerous. If his father had wanted him dead, a single blow would have been enough. What's the point of Ye Tian's speed? Sun Feng thought. Speed could outpace the eye, but without the strength to back it up, it meant nothing. Against a great martial artist, against someone with the power his father possessed, a single move would be enough to kill him. With that in mind, Sun Feng felt no anxiety. He simply waited for word that Ye Tian was dead. 3 days later, at dawn, Sun Qinghe left the Sun residence and walked straight to Ye Tian's house, making no effort to conceal his actions. He knew the deed couldn't be hidden anyway. Better to do it openly, he decided, so the killing would serve as a warning and a show of the Sun family's might. A roar rolled through the central garden compound. The presence of a great martial artist spread outward like a storm, sending many residents into a panic. The aura was arrogant and brazen, paying no heed to the coastal base's rules. "Great martial artist!" some people cried. Ye Tian opened his eyes and looked toward the source of that pressure, only a short distance away. Ye Tian felt it before he saw it, a presence like a blade cutting through the air, a momentum laced with the unmistakable posture of a master swordsman. This was no ordinary enforcer. Whoever had come for him carried the bearing of a true great martial artist. Sun family. Ye Tian said the name softly. He had assumed the Suns had given up on him, but this was belated revenge. Fury and killing intent flared up inside him. "Sun family, you're courting death." Ye Yu had already left for school. Ye Tian was alone in the villa and no longer worried about endangering him. The intruder's speed was terrifying. One moment, he stood outside the central garden compound. The next, he was at Ye Tian's gate. With a sweep of spiritual sensing, the man had traced Ye Tian's aura to the villa, and Ye Tian saw him clearly. Sun Qinghe, Sun Feng's father. Ye Tian was not surprised. After the display of power he'd shown, ordinary elite fighters couldn't touch him. Of course, the Suns would dispatch a great martial artist. While he watched, Ye Tian activated his copy talent and immediately probed Sun Qinghe's abilities. Sun Qing cultivation talent, medium knife talent, medium. By talent, Sun Qinghe was unremarkable. His cultivation gift was only average. With a medium-grade aptitude, he could at best reach the level of a great martial artist. Anything higher was beyond him. He did, however, possess a medium sword and knife talent. With that, he could have tempered a bronze-level sword technique like the Qingfeng chop, giving him a fighting power roughly on par with a late-stage great martial artist. Not bad, but ultimately limited. A pity, because his skill alone wouldn't save him here. Ye Tian, die! Sun Qinghe snarled and struck toward the villa. A blue blade of spirit qi tore through the air, gouging the villa's outer wall as it sliced toward Ye Tian. "How dare you destroy my villa?" he shouted. Ye Tian's face flamed with fury. With a single sword movement, he smashed Sun Qinghe's knife blade to pieces, and in the same instant, he'd already darted to the outside of the villa, so fast Sun Qinghe couldn't react. Sun Qinghe's speed at best matched 1 or 2 times the speed of sound. Ye Tian moved at something like 12 times that. There was no way Sun Qinghe could perceive or follow Ye Tian's movements. Not good. Sun Qinghe's face tightened. He realized with a jolt that he had underestimated Ye Tian. The youth's speed was beyond anything he had expected, even surpassing the peak great warriors in the clan. Knife curtain. Sun spun his blade. Sword chi layered and condensed into a shimmering curtain of blades that wrapped around him. The technique was a bronze-level defensive sword art, a rare find he'd acquired by chance. It added a valuable layer of protection, enough to withstand the strikes of mid to late-stage great warriors. Ye Tian slashed through the barrier, quietly triggering his high-power talent. The strike, unleashed with the force of a grandmaster's full blow, cleaved the knife curtain apart in an instant. But at the same moment, Ye Tian's sword snapped. Not because Sun Qinghe's defense was too strong, but because the blade itself was too poor in quality to survive such power. The blade was nothing more than a common Yuanbing sword, a low-level Yuanli weapon, ordinary even among its class. It could not withstand the force of a sect master's strike and snapped apart. Even so, the broken blade carried enough momentum to keep moving. In the next instant, it drove into Sun Qinghe, a jagged edge tearing into his body. "Master!" Sun Qinghe stared at Ye Tian in stunned disbelief. The single word left his lips, full of regret. If he had known Ye Tian possessed the power of a sect master, he never would have struck back, not even if it had meant sacrificing his son. But now it was too late. By provoking Ye Tian, Sun Qinghe had doomed the Sun family. He felt like the one who had destroyed them. His consciousness ebbed, and he slumped to the ground, dead. Ye Tian glanced down at the ruined sword with a trace of helplessness, and then muttered, "Terrible craftsmanship." His eyes immediately moved to the sword still clutched in Sun Qinghe's hand. The knife hadn't taken a scratch from the impact. No nick, nothing. Ye Tian picked it up and gave it a light flick. The clear ring of metal hung in the air, pleasing to the ear. "Nice blade," he said. "Must be a mid-level Yuan Force knife." He searched Sun Qinghe's body and found a secret manual tucked away. Knife curtain. Fortunately, the book had escaped being shredded by flying fragments and was intact. Ye Tian recognized it at once as the bronze-rank defensive sword technique Sun Qinghe had just used. It was both rare and extremely valuable. Looking down at the corpse, he couldn't help but smirk. The kid had been generous in his way, left behind a fine weapon, a bronze-rank sword manual, and even a high-level cultivation talent. Who knew he'd be so thoughtful and provide exactly the things I was missing? As a half-sardonic, half-grateful gesture toward the Sun family father and son, Ye Tian muttered 2 words. "Good people." Chapter 53. Sun Qinghe was dead, but that did not settle anything. "They dared to attack me in broad daylight," Ye Tian murmured, "and the Lin family's influence here is all but gone." He let out a long, low sigh. The Lin family had once enforced a strict rule among the coastal base warriors. No killings, no reprisals, no one was to be slain at will. But the Sun family had openly flouted that order. "They're stronger than the Lin family now, and firmly rooted in the coastal base," he thought. So of course they don't take the Lin family seriously. Ye Tian's jaw set. If the Sun family doesn't respect the rules, then I don't have to either. He gripped the intermediate Yuanbing sword weapon in his hand. Cold, lethal intent spread through him. With his current strength, what was the Sun family but a nuisance? Even if the two masters from Iron Tooth Base came after him, he wouldn't be afraid. As far as Ye Tian knew, those two masters weren't particularly strong. They were only in the early stages of mastery. Whether they had any special talent was unknown, and in any case such geniuses were rare. If those two really lacked special endowments, then even he might struggle to hold a sword against them. At the coastal base, he was almost invincible. There was nothing to fear. "Let's make some trouble," he murmured to himself. 10 minutes later, he stood alone at the main gate of the Sun family residential compound. The murderous intent radiating from him made the guards at the gate break out in a cold sweat. "Stop! This is the Sun family. Hold it right there," one guard barked, forcing the trembling from his voice as best he could. "Sun family?" Not Tian's voice rang out, icy and absolute. His words carried like a blade. The air itself seemed to tighten. Several guards visibly flinched. Go call for help," one of them managed to shout. But before anyone could move, a sliver of sword light filled their world. It tore through the gate, scattering wood and stone into dust. When the brilliance faded, several guards lay motionless where they'd stood, and the Grand Sun family gate had been reduced to powder. The Sun family compound was small. Everything happening inside was visible at once. The guards were on the spot in an instant. Raised and trained by the Suns from childhood, each man had the strength of a warrior. Their captain was even an elite martial artist. There were roughly 100 of them in all, an indispensable fighting force for the family. They responded by forming a battle line, Yuanli swords raised in unison. Their combined aura was almost enough to rival a great warrior. Then a single cyan blade tore through the air. It split the formation cleanly down the middle and slashed across the compound, cutting buildings in two. Houses exploded into splinters and the earth itself cracked under the force of it. It was a Grandmaster's strike. The blow came from Ye Tian. Most of the Sun Guards were killed or grievously wounded. The few who remained had their morale shattered. One by one, they turned and fled. The senior members of the Sun family arrived one after another, and their faces went pale as they took in the scene. "Sect Master level strike!" Great Elder Sun Kong blurted, voice tight. He was a great warrior at the very peak of his rank, and there was no mistaking it. An attack that created that much devastation could only be the work of Sect Master level power. Ye Tian certainly wasn't supposed to be a Sect Master, and yet the force of his blow matched that grade. Sun Kong wasn't without comparable offensive might himself. His aptitude for the sword had allowed him to refine several bronze-tier sword techniques to their pinnacle, multiplying his raw striking power. On pure attack power alone, he could even rival or exceed the newly promoted Sect Master. But raw power isn't everything. Sun Kong knew, painfully, that he was still far weaker in actual combat. He couldn't beat a true Sect Master. Their speed and defensive reactions were on another level. Crossing from Great Warrior into Sect Ma, Stir changed a fighter fundamentally. Everything from reflexes to defense and timing widened into a gulf that talent and brute force alone couldn't bridge. He could only withstand a handful of strikes from the Sect Master. Sun Kong felt a strange relief. The newcomer wasn't a full Grandmaster, and yet the force behind his blows was extraordinary for someone so young. This had to be a prodigy. Sun Feng's shout cut through the murmurs. "It's Ye Tian!" The hall went silent. The Sun family knew the name well. Ye Tian had once publicly shamed them. They had wanted to deal with him long ago, but political considerations tied to stabilizing their coastal base had held them back. To see him here now and so powerful stunned everyone. Sun Feng's eyes fixed on the sword in Ye Tian's hand. Up close it was unmistakable, an intermediate Yuanli sword, the pattern of the hilt familiar from countless family relics. "That sword belongs to my father," he said, voice trembling. "Where is my father?" Ye Tian's expression didn't change. Coldly, he answered, "Sun Qing'e is dead." He smiled faintly and almost conversationally added, "Young man, have you come today to wipe out my grandson's family?" Sun Kong pushed through the people and planted himself directly in front of Ye Tian, fury making his voice hard. What are you saying? Ever since your grandson sent assassins after my family, we haven't been able to let this go. Do you expect us to stand down now? The two men faced each other in a charged silence, the weight of past grievances and new deaths pressing on everyone present. If you really are as powerful as you claim, Sun Kong said, forcing a smile, the Sun family has no reason to strike first. Why not call this off today? Great Elder, he killed my father. Kill him! Sun Feng screamed like a man possessed. Enough! Sun Kong snapped at Sun Feng. His voice was tight with anger. If it weren't for the trouble you stirred up, we wouldn't be in this mess to begin with. Sun Kong's words were as much for show as for counsel. He didn't truly want to make peace with Ye Tian. He simply didn't want an all-out battle here and now. Martial artists at that level were deadly. Their blows could level more than just bodies. A fight in the city would cause catastrophic collateral destruction. Even if the Sun family managed to kill Ye Tian, they would be left crippled in the aftermath. His plan was to let Ye Tian leave, then strike later when they could set an ambush. It was a calculated deception, but a plan doomed before it began. Reconcile? Ye Tian's eyes flashed. No, I won't accept it. He turned to the gathered Sun family members, voice suddenly keen with challenge. I'll give you all one chance. Something in him tightened with excitement. Up until now, he'd only estimated his true strength. The last opponent, Sun Qinghe, had been too weak to tempt him. Now, faced with the Sun family's dozen challengers, Ye Tian finally wanted to find out what he was really capable of. He had wanted to find out whether the Sun family's fighters could actually stir his fighting spirit, so he deliberately baited them with nonsense to draw their masters out. After that provocation, almost all of the Sun family's senior fighters had shown up. All those below Great Warrior rank, fall back! Sun Kong shouted. Boom! Boom! 2 warriors at the peak of Great Martial Artist and 7 full Great Martial Artists, 9 in all, closed in to surround Ye Tian. The air crackled. All at once the fight seemed ready to explode. Ye Tian casually appraised them. None of them possessed top-tier cultivation talent. The highest among them was only a high-level cultivation gift. That made sense. If the Sun family had produced anyone with supreme talent, they wouldn't still be hiding. Aside from cultivation types, 5 of the 9 were sword specialists. 2 of those swordists had only mid-level sword talent. They're not weak. Kill him together, Sun Kong urged, his voice sharp. Chapter 54. Even the lion and the rabbit were fighting with everything they had, and Sun Kong and the other great warriors naturally didn't take Ye Tian lightly. They launched their attacks at full force, but before they could strike, Ye Tian moved first. Speed talent, strength talent, shadow kill. The 3 talents came in swift succession. It wasn't even Ye Tian's full power, but it was devastating all the same. His speed talent detonated in a blur, his velocity spiking to the equivalent of 12 times the speed of sound, far beyond what any great martial artist could hope to track. In an instant, 2 ordinary martial artists were singled out and beheaded by a single lethal stroke. They fell dead where they stood. It happened so quickly that when Sun Kong and the others came to their senses, there were only 7 great martial artists left. This speed, Sun Kong's face went pale. That was no great martial artist's burst of speed. It was sectmaster level, vastly superior. Definitely a high-grade speed talent, he thought, feeling a sour twinge of envy. Having one special talent marks someone as a prodigy. The Sun family, notorious for keeping its sword lineage pure through internal marriages, still drew envy from the other clans for that very reason. Someone with 2 special talents, and both at high levels, was practically divine. Such a person provoked nothing but jealousy and fear. Sun Kong's face hardened. He knew that if Ye Tian lived today and continued to grow, the boy could one day undo the Sun family entirely. Make sure he dies, he ordered, voice like iron. A famed Sun family warrior launched himself at Ye Tian in a desperate suicidal charge. In an instant the man fell, struck down by Ye Tian before he could even land a blow. The crowd that had boasted of the Sun family's strength went silent with shame. One after another, the Sun family's champions threw themselves at Ye Tian, all defeated with terrifying ease. Their speed was sluggish, their power weak. To Ye Tian they were no more threatening than toddlers. Sun Ling, Finish him, Sun Kong barked, turning to the only female warrior among them. The woman was another of the Sun family's famed warriors, ancient, frail, and with only a few years left to live. Because she was a woman, her rank was slightly below Sun Kong's, but that did nothing to slow the determination in her eyes. Everyone watched in stunned silence as Sun Ling's wrinkled face set with iron resolve, and she charged straight at Ye Tian, as if intent on dying with him. Sun Kong and the two other surviving great warriors scrambled back at once. "Go and die," she hissed. Sun Ling's features twisted viciously. She drew several ragged breaths, then let out a terrible roar and detonated herself. The explosion was on the scale of a grandmaster's full-power strike, hundreds of meters of force condensed into an instant. Within 100 meters, everything was shredded. Houses were blasted to splinters, and the earth itself was torn open into a great crater. Sun Kong and the others had managed to fall back just in time, but the interval had been too short. They staggered, vomiting blood, their injuries severe. "Even if he survives, Ye Tian will be gravely wounded," Sun Kong cried, voice edged with hope and fear. At that distance, there had been no way for Ye Tian to dodge. Sun Ling's self-detonation had been a full-radius blast, impossible to evade. Such a technique could be shrugged off by a sect master with strong defenses, but Ye Tian was no sect master. His defenses were far weaker. No one here expected him to survive that kind of close-range suicide technique. "All that for nothing. Pity about Elder Sun Ling," someone murmured. At the Sun Clan's compound, that one loss seemed a small price to pay for the family's survival. Sun family members sobbed and whooped with relief and triumph. "Ye Tian is finally dead. The Sun Clan lives on. Elder Sun Ling went out fighting at the right time. Ha ha! What use was Ye Tian's genius if he still died by our hands?" As the clan began to celebrate, a cutting voice rose from the settling dust. "Celebrating a little early, aren't you?" Through the thick smoke and grit, Ye Tian stepped out. His clothes were shredded, but his body was unbroken. No wounds, no blood. For a moment everything froze. Sun Kong staggered back, shock written across his face. "Impossible! How can you still be alive?" The other members of the Sun family went pale, their faces drained of color, and their eyes full of despair. Elder Sun Ling had triggered a self-detonating technique, an all-covering blast with the force of a sect master's full-strength strike. There was no Grandmaster-level defense that could safely stop such an attack. On the surface, Ye Tian appeared untouched and had come to a halt. Only he knew the truth. He hadn't really stopped it at all. He had been badly damaged. His defense had a fatal flaw. Even though he'd fled at 12 times the speed of sound, he'd been a beat too late. He had never expected a great martial artist to sacrifice himself and detonate his own arcane technique. Had he anticipated that, he would never have given Sun Ling the chance. He'd been only a few dozen meters from the center of the blast. Thanks to his elite warrior defenses, he'd escaped being torn apart, but the internal damage was severe. Only his exceptional healing talent kept him from collapsing outright. It still took more than 10 seconds of rapid recovery for his injuries to stabilize. At least there were no outward wounds. "Careless," Ye Tian muttered, admitting he had underestimated the great martial artist. Not a mistake he would make again. "Run!" Sun Kong shouted. Sun Kong was the first to try to run, but no matter how fast he was, he couldn't outrun Ye Tian. In a flash, Ye Tian closed the distance. The next instant, Sun Kong's body hit the ground. One breath, and Ye Tian had killed him. Ye Tian was about to finish off the others when a deep voice rang out from nearby. "Young man, show some mercy. Let these kids go, will you?" An old man in white stepped into view. A few people nearby gasped, "Sect Master!" Ye Tian felt the man's aura at once. Sect Master level, far beyond an ordinary great martial artist. The old man closed to within 50 meters. Ye Tian activated his perception. A readout flickered into his mind. Name, Yao Ye. Cultivation talent, advanced. He smirked inwardly. Just a run-of-the-mill sect master. With an advanced talent like that, the man's cultivation was probably only at the early sect master stage. Ye Tian dismissed him and paid him no more attention. In his early days as sect master, the man's strength barely topped 1 million pounds. Even at his best, it might reach 1.5 million, and with the boost from his yuan force, it only climbed to 3 million. Ye Tian's maximum attack power, by contrast, could reach 6 million pounds. Speed favored Ye Tian as well. A typical sect master could move at about 10 times the speed of sound. Ye Tian moved at 12, leaving the sect master well behind. The only real advantage the old man had was his defense, but defense meant nothing if Ye Tian never let him land a blow. In raw power, the sect master was simply outmatched. "Why should I give you face?" Ye Tian said bluntly, without shame. Old man Ye fixed him with a long, appraising stare. "Don't underestimate me," he replied coldly. "This old man is still a master." Author's note: new chapter tonight, scheduled for the early morning of January 16. 10 guaranteed posts on release day. If the response is good, I'll try to write more. I didn't include shelf testimonials this time, so please subscribe if you enjoy the story. If you'd like to support me, giving a top-up vote and a recommendation helps a lot. Thank you. Chapter 55, Grandmaster, that's not nearly enough. Ye Tian snapped, refusing to defer to Grandmaster Yao Ye. His tone was sharp and insolent, and the crowd fell silent. Many onlookers who had come for the excitement stared in disbelief. How dare a youth speak to the sect master like that? No matter how strong Ye Tian was, confronting the Grandmaster so openly was audacious. "Master Yao, please, take charge of the Sun family." The last two great warriors of the Sun family cried, advancing and dropping to their knees before Yao Ye. "We beg you, Grandmaster, save my grandson's family." A wave of Sun family members followed, falling to the ground and pleading in unison. Yao Ye regarded them coolly for a long moment, as if weighing the petition against something else entirely. "All right," he said at last, his voice light and unhurried. He showed no visible compassion for the Sun family's plight. In truth, he did not particularly care whether they lived or died. But political reality mattered. The Sun family was one of the clans of Iron Tooth Base. If they were left to be eradicated by the warriors of Linhai Base without any intervention, the damage to Iron Tooth Base's reputation would be severe. As one of the two great masters of Iron Tooth Base, Yao Ye could not appear indifferent. Refusing to act now would signal weakness to the Linhai faction. So he answered the kneeling petitioners, not out of pity, but out of necessity. The Iron Tooth Base had to keep a firm grip on Linhai Base. To preserve the prestige of his faction's warriors, Yao Ye couldn't allow the Linhai Base faction to grow unchecked. If Ye Tian had any intention of destroying the Sun family, Yao Ye would never stand for it, which is why he'd rushed over the moment he heard the Sun family was in trouble. "Young man," Yao Ye said, giving him one last option, "apologize to the Sun family, and I won't press this offense against you." Yao Ye loomed over him, brimming with the easy confidence of a sect master. Years of command at the Iron Tooth Base had taught him to see everyone beneath him as ants. Even Sun Kong, a peak-level martial artist, barely registered in his mind, merely a powerful ant. To be fair, a sect master with authority like Yao Ye's could indeed make short work of even the greatest fighters if he chose. A single order could mean death before a challenger could react. Power like that inevitably breeds a hollow pride. Yao Ye hadn't even seen the strike Ye Tian had launched. All he noticed was Ye Tian's ragged clothes and awkward posture, and from that he concluded the man couldn't possibly be a true master. If he were, the Sun family wouldn't have left him in such a state. That assumption made Yao Ye dismiss him completely. "You're Ye Tian, right?" Yao Ye sneered. "I'll give you a choice. Apologize and kowtow to me now, and I might let your offense go. Refuse, and you'll fall here the same way the Sun family did." Ye Tian's calm defiance set the hall buzzing and enraged Yao Ye. The crowd reacted with shock and outrage. Who dared threaten the sect master? The Sun family, delighted, cried out in unison, "Kill him! How dare he offend a master? If he dies, we're safe." Hands reached for weapons and faces lit with vicious anticipation. Yao Ye, however, didn't wait. He flexed his fingers and thrust one out with terrifying speed. The finger shot like a lightning bolt, so fast it seemed to pierce sound itself, a strike nobody present could have reacted to in time. Even the seasoned warrior's defenses were useless against it. Even a legendary fighter like Sun Kong would have been helpless against Yao Ye's finger techniques. No matter how much raw power he possessed, a single precise strike from Yao Ye could maim him in an instant, or even kill him. That was the terrible advantage of extreme speed. Yao Ye, however, had underestimated Ye Tian. Ye Tian flicked the knife in his hand. The blade glanced off Yao Ye's fingers, and he sneered. Too slow. Interesting. So it can stop my finger force. No wonder it swept through the Sun family. Yao Ye muttered, momentarily surprised. But that first strike had only been a feint. He hadn't used his real power yet. With a shout, Yao Ye struck for real. His body blurred, vanishing and reappearing as if by teleportation, an almost supernatural display of speed. He surged forward at what felt like 10 times the speed of sound, confident he could end Ye Tian in an instant, and seized Ye Tian's throat with his right hand. A blade flashed before him. With a wet, sickening sound, one of Yao Ye's hands was severed and dropped to the ground. No? He panicked, throwing up a Yuan Force shield and trying to fall back. He retreated fast, but Ye Tian was faster. In the same heartbeat, a second green gust sliced through the air. Boom! The blade of wind tore through Yao Ye's defense. The Yuan Force shield exploded, and the blow hurled him end over end. His shirt hung in tatters. A knife-deep gash scored his chest, more than an inch wide and terrifying to see. Grandmaster speed! Grandmaster attack! Yao Ye realized, horrified. Ye Tian's speed and power outmatched him. His defenses couldn't hold. There was no doubt now, Ye Tian was a true grandmaster. Damn it! The Sun family had gone too far to provoke someone like this, Yao Ye thought, bitterly regretting that he'd stepped in for them. Friend, I yield, he blurted, desperation in his voice. Ye Tian's reply was cold and hard. I will not accept your surrender. Yao Ye fled, and Ye Tian pursued mercilessly. They burst out of the Sun family estate and into the open, but Ye Tian closed on him in an instant. With a swift, brutal motion, he brought a second blade across Yao Ye's arm. One hand fell away to the ground. Facing that sudden, irreversible loss, Yao Ye's voice cracked. Old Man Li, come save me, he screamed. The Old Man Li he begged for was not a hallucination, but another elder from the Iron Tooth base. No sooner had the name left his mouth than a figure in gray cloth materialized at the edge of the clearing. But instead of relief, Old Man Li's arrival only deepened Yao Ye's panic. Master Ye, this has nothing to do with me, Old Man Li said flatly, stepping back as if to put distance between himself and the fighting. Yao Ye's face contorted with rage and disbelief. Old Man Li's power exceeded his own. If the two of them had fought together, there might still have been a chance. Now the help he had pinned his hopes on had declared himself unwilling. Yao Ye's hope dwindled to nothing. Ye Tian, I'll fight you, Yao Ye spat, throwing himself forward in desperation. He channeled an explosive arcane spell, trying to augment his strength and overwhelm his opponent. It made no difference. Ye Tian activated Shadow Kill, and with a velocity said to be 12 times the speed of sound, his blade became a blur. The strike that followed moved with a terrifying, unnatural swiftness, far beyond anything Yao Ye could counter. Yao Ye poured his power into a last-ditch secret technique, but he moved too slowly. Before the technique could take hold, Ye Tian's strike found him. Yao Ye's head was cleaved off, and the master collapsed. From the sidelines, Old Man Li, who had been watching the fight, stared in stunned silence. Then a spark of satisfaction flashed in his eyes. Master Yi, he cried, hurrying forward with hands clasped in a respectful greeting. You won't spare the Sun family as well, will you? Old Man Li asked, his tone obsequious. Ye Tian's voice was flat. The Sun family offended me. They asked for death. You needn't worry. After today, the Sun family will no longer exist. Old Man Li nodded eagerly, making his meaning plain. He would help Ye Tian deal with the Suns to show his support. He was frightened. Ye Tian's power was terrifying, and if Yao Ye had been cut down so easily, he himself stood no chance. Better to curry favor than to resist. Very good, Old Man Li said quickly. I don't want to see the Sun family again tomorrow. With that, Ye Tian gave nothing more and turned away. Chapter 56. After Ye Tian left, Old Man Li walked straight to the Sun family estate. Moments later, screams tore through the night. By morning, the whole coastal base was talking about one piece of news that shook everyone. The Sun family was gone, and the person responsible was Ye Tian, the same Ye Tian who had beaten Sun Feng. People were stunned. Everyone had assumed Ye Tian was only a powerful elite fighter, not someone who could obliterate an entire clan on his own. No one expected him to be so ruthless that a single man could bring down the Sun family. Even more explosive was the second report. Grandmaster Yao Ye, one of the two grandmasters in the area, was dead. That was an even bigger shock. A grandmaster's strength far exceeded that of ordinary elite fighters. In the Linhai base, there wasn't a single sect master left, and only 2 sect masters from the Iron Tooth base had come to help. Now, one of those sect masters was dead, and the other, frightened, took it upon himself to finish off the remaining Sun family members. Whether out of fear or to save his own skin, no one could say. What did this mean? By now, Ye Tian had become unstoppable along the coastal territories. No one there could stand against him. When the news reached those who knew him, shock spread through them like wildfire. Windwolf, leader of the Windwolf hunting squad, went momentarily still when he heard. The Ye Tian brothers actually wiped out the Sun family and killed a sect master, he breathed. He didn't know the exact power level of that sect master, but he knew the Sun family's reputation well. They boasted 10 great martial artists, 2 of them truly at the peak, and their swordsmen were famously gifted. Most Sun family fighters could crush opponents of equal rank and even defeat those stronger than themselves. When Windwolf first heard of Sun Feng's background, he had been genuinely worried for Ye Tian. And yet, only a few months later, the Sun family had been destroyed by Ye Tian, a grandmaster among them fallen. Windwolf let out a long, low sigh. The Ye Tian brothers just keep getting stronger. I'm not even fit to look up to them anymore. It was an extraordinary honor simply to know Ye Tian. If word of this ever leaked out, it would make everyone else green with envy. Lin Wanli stood there with the intelligence dossier in his hand, speechless for a long time. He was genuinely stunned. The Sun family had been wiped out, Master Yao Ye killed, and Ye Tian's power was terrifying. This wasn't just high-level potential. It looked like top-tier talent. His strength and speed had already reached Grandmaster level. Clearly, he possessed both the strength and speed talents. Unlike some others who might feel threatened, Lin Wanli felt pleased to see Ye Tian rise. Ye Tian was aligned with the coastal base, and with him on their side, the coastal forces could easily overwhelm the Iron Tooth base. Lin Wanli made his decision. Tomorrow he would pay a visit to Master Ye Tian. He had no intention of trying to recruit or buy favor. Besides, the Lin family wasn't in a position to co-opt someone of Ye Tian's caliber. But as a representative of the family, it would be improper not to go and offer his respects now that Ye Tian had become the coastal base's strongest figure. If the Lin family could win the favor of even 1 or 2 powerful houses, it would be a big advantage. Plenty of families thought the same way. On that day, a stream of family heads and elders arrived at Ye Tian's residence bearing lavish gifts, all hoping to curry favor. Ye Tian turned them down flat. He issued a single, clear response to the outside world. He wanted to cultivate in peace, and no one was to disturb him. For most of the great families, that was welcome news. At least Ye Tian was declaring he didn't intend to vie for supremacy or threaten their interests. The Sun family, however, was a different story. Their own provocations had put them in the position they were in. Because of that, and out of caution, the other families quietly spread the word. Do not provoke Ye Tian or Ye Yu. The result was that Ye Yu became effectively untouchable at the academy. No one dared bother him, and Ye Tian finally had the uninterrupted time he needed to practice. The developer of the Central Garden had even paid to renovate his villa at their expense. Having Ye Tian as a resident had been immensely profitable for them. Even setting aside everything else, villa prices in the area had at least doubled, and the developer's gains were enormous. Skimping on repairs was out of the question. Days slipped by. Nearly a month after the fall of the Sun family, Ye Tian's training had advanced considerably. He had refined the circulation through his skin, flesh, bones, and blood to the utmost. His foundation had become exceptionally strong. It's time to temper the internal organs, he decided. In the hierarchy of cultivation, an elite martial artist tempers the blood. A great martial artist tempers the 5 internal organs. Once the 5 organs are forged like steel, they are not easily harmed. When the organs reach that extreme level, even consuming poison poses no danger. Although the internal organs of elite martial artists were far tougher than those of ordinary people, they still hadn't reached the point of safely swallowing raw poison, a level Ye Tian was now determined to achieve. Once he began refining his internal organs, the bottleneck would shatter, and he would automatically ascend into the realm of the great martial artist. His power would then climb quickly. Let's get started, he thought. Ye Tian began practicing the intermediate Yuanli body refining technique and swallowed a dose of high fierce beast blood. He controlled the tempering power that erupted from it, directing it into his 5 viscera and 6 entrails and slowly forging them from the inside out. A low rumble passed through him as the shackles in his underworld were completely broken. His bodily strength surged. Ye Tian understood immediately. He had broken through into the great martial artist realm. The leap from elite martial artist to great martial artist was immense. Along with a surge in spiritual power, his physical strength, speed, and defense all rose dramatically. Where his spirit once reached only a few dozen meters, it was now expanding rapidly, stretching ever farther. Half a day later, the metamorphosis was complete. Ye Tian had truly become a great warrior. He closed his eyes and measured the changes. His spiritual aura now extended in a 200-meter radius. By comparison, an early-stage grand martial artist's aura typically reached only about 20 meters. In raw spiritual power, he could rival the peak of a grand martial artist, though he was still far below the master. He tested his speed next. 20 times the speed of sound. That was how fast he moved now, a dramatic improvement over before. His strength had increased as well, but not enormously. He registered roughly 120,000 pounds of lifting power. It was only the beginning of the breakthrough. The figure would rise as his cultivation deepened. His defenses had strengthened by several times too, but they remained inadequate, a weakness that wouldn't be overcome until he acquired the defensive talent. The supply of high-tier ferocious beast blood used for the transformation was nearly exhausted. It was time to return to the little Chiba forest. Ye Tian murmured to himself and prepared to leave. Chapter 57. This time away, Ye Tian didn't worry once about his sister, Ye Yu. He was already the strongest fighter at the coastal base now. Anyone who tried to touch her would be courting death. After leaving the base, he went straight to the little Chiba forest and headed for the little Jin clan. When Xiao Jin saw him, he bounded over at once. The little beast was different from before. Larger, its presence far more imposing. "Master!" Xiao Jin called. Ye Tian could tell immediately. Xiao Jin's aura had risen. What had been a mid-level fierce beast was now a high-level fierce beast. He wasn't surprised. He himself had just broken through from elite martial artist to great martial artist, and with Xiao Jin's top-tier bloodline talent, reaching the peak of the intermediate rank and then advancing to high level was only natural. Xiao Jin had just advanced into a high-level fierce beast and was close to the peak tier for hunting creatures of that rank. He was still far below the top-tier fierce beasts, though his strength wasn't enough yet to seriously harm them. "Xiao Jin, I told you to collect beast blood. How's it going?" Ye Tian asked. "Master, come see," Xiao Jin cried. Little Golden Fart nearly dragged Ye Tian over to the storage area, practically carrying him upside down. When Ye Tian saw what was there, he was speechless. Several huge pools were filled with high-level fierce beast blood, and there were even more pools of intermediate beast blood, more than a dozen in all. There must be around 10,000 portions of high-level beast blood and at least 200,000 portions of intermediate blood, Ye Tian estimated. High-level blood was extremely valuable to him. The intermediate blood was useless to Ye Tian personally for now, but his sister was about to ascend to the warrior realm and would soon need large quantities of intermediate fierce beast blood to temper her body. They could sell some of the stockpile and reserve the rest for her. High-level fierce beast blood was exactly the kind of resource he needed. Reaching the pinnacle of the great martial artist realm demanded an enormous amount of it, so even this large haul might not be enough to push him all the way. But it was certainly valuable. Ye Tian gave Xiao Jin a momentary nod of approval. "Nice work. From now on, you don't need to collect intermediate fierce beast blood and store it. If you encounter an intermediate beast, just swallow its blood yourself. No need to keep it. But gather as much high-level fierce beast blood as you can. I'll need it." "Master, Xiao Jin understands," Xiao Jin replied obediently. In the weeks that followed, Ye Tian kept shuttling between the little thousand-leaf forest and the Linhai base, carrying back shipments of intermediate and high-level fierce beast blood. There was a lot to move, but with Ye Tian's speed, he could travel at about 20 times the speed of sound. Transport was barely a concern. That would be 6,800 meters in a single second, 6.8 kilometers. Of course, Ye Tian didn't actually run that fast for long. The terrain was full of hazards. If he tried to sprint at that speed over any significant distance, he'd ram into rocks or savage beasts. Such velocities only appeared in combat as short bursts, moments when he could move at the equivalent of 20 times the speed of sound. For anything resembling long-distance travel, he was far slower. Even at his best pace, it took tens of seconds to cover a few hundred meters. Still, his speed was enough to make the blood collection efficient. Ye Tian quickly transported the beast's blood back to the coastal base, and to make storage easier, he'd had an underground chamber dug beneath the villa specifically for preserving the samples. Once the blood was emptied into the facility, he handed Xiao Jin a new assignment. Find a beast whose natural defense was extraordinary. Defense had always been Ye Tian's weak point. Shoring it up was a priority. His copying talent allowed him to duplicate abilities repeatedly, but so far he hadn't encountered a talent worth taking until now. Since a perfect defensive trait hadn't presented itself, he decided to copy Xiao Jin's endurance ability directly. As a result, Ye Tian's lineup of talents changed. In addition to his original copying aptitude, he now possessed Xiao Jin's endurance trait, giving his defenses a much-needed boost. Name Tian talents: Cultivation, Top Speed, Top, Knife, Medium, Shadow, Primary, Healing, Strength, Advanced, Endurance. Medium. Ye Tian's endurance talent let him fight for long stretches without faltering. Coupled with his extraordinary physical strength, he wasn't easily worn down in siege or drawn-out battles. He could keep himself at peak fighting condition far longer than ordinary cultivators. After returning to the coastal base, Ye Tian entered a long period of recuperation. He stayed mostly in seclusion, only occasionally slipping back to the little thousand-leaf forest to check for new opportunities or threats. A month passed, in that slow, steady way cultivation brings. Because he had just broken through into the rank of a great martial artist, his progress accelerated. Breakthroughs and absorptions came faster than before. To accelerate that growth, Ye Tian had spent a large amount of high-grade fierce beast blood, and the results were obvious. His physical strength climbed to 150,000 jin, a level comparable to the starting strength of many great martial artists. He felt the difference not only in raw power, but in endurance and recovery. His body responded to training and injury with a speed it had never known. On this day, he wandered back into the little thousand-leaf forest. The air was cool and alive with rustling leaves. He had only just stepped in when a small figure bounded up to him. Xiao Jin, eyes shining, practically vibrating with excitement. "Master!" Xiao Jin blurted out before he could catch his breath. "I found a fierce beast with super defensive power." "Really?" Ye Tian's interest snapped to full attention. An expression of genuine excitement spread across his face. A beast with extraordinary defense could mean rare materials, powerful blood, or a valuable training opponent. He glanced toward the deeper thicket where Xiao Jin had been headed. "Show me. Where is it?" Xiao Jin pointed eagerly into the forest, and without another word, Ye Tian moved after him. The little wood seemed suddenly full of promise. There was a hunt to be had, and Ye Tian felt the sharp, familiar thrill of testing newly increased strength against something worthy. "I sent a lot of people to look for powerful beasts that seemed unusually defensive," Xiao Jin said breathlessly. "A few days ago, they finally found a huge snake. Its scales were like armor. It's a high-level beast, so I went myself." He shrugged. "My attacks didn't even hurt it. The only thing I had on it was speed. I could outrun it, so it couldn't catch me. A high-level beast that even you couldn't touch." Xiao Jin sounded worried. Hearing that, Ye Tian's heart tightened. That kind of invulnerability could only come from an extraordinary defensive talent. "Where is it? Take me there," he ordered. Xiao Jin didn't hesitate. He leapt up and, with Ye Tian strapped to his back, darted into the little thousand-leaf forest and then deeper into the Kochiba woods. The trees were thick and cramped their pace, so they couldn't run at full speed. After about 10 minutes, they pushed into a darker, older part of the forest and came upon a pool of water. "Master, this is it," Xiaojin said, pointing. The pool looked bottomless. Its depth swallowed light and made it hard to see what lay below. Ye Tian stepped closer, peering into the inky water, and an intense, animal presence brushed against him like a cold wind. He felt the aura of a fierce beast emanating from the pool. It was powerful, primally defensive, and utterly alien. Ye Tian's breath caught. "Wow," he whispered, a chill running down his spine. A colossal snake rose from the watering hole, its upper body arched completely out of the water. It was coal black, its countless scales flashing like a panoply of jewels. Its body must be at least 30 meters long. Ye Tian estimated at a glance. Without thinking, he ran a quick scan of the creature's attributes. Species, black-scaled python. Bloodline talent, advanced. Defensive talent, medium. Medium defensive talent, he mused. Not exceptional, but enough to cover my weak points, and I can always copy and upgrade if I run into a higher defensive talent later. With that, Ye Tian silently copied the python's medium defensive talent. Chapter 58 Hiss. The black-scaled python reared back and lunged toward Xiaojin, its hiss ripping the air. It recognized him. A few days ago, Xiaojin had tormented it, and it still smarted from that beating. Old resentment flared, and it couldn't help but strike when it saw him again. Ye Tian surveyed the massive serpent with a faint smile. A body that size should yield hundreds of vials of high-grade ferocious beast blood, he said. And that hide would make excellent armor. What a pity for you. He moved. Ye Tian tapped his 20-fold sound speed and awakened his power talent in an instant. With a single, lightning-fast stroke of his sword, he ripped open a 7-inch gash along the python's flank. The scales that everyone had called indestructible shattered like glass under his blade. Ye Tian's strength was on another level. He had already reached Sectmaster caliber. The python's defenses, no matter how formidable, only measured up to about Sectmaster level at best. Even someone like Grandmaster Yao Ye might have struggled to withstand this blow. For the black-scaled python, there was no chance. In an instant, Ye Tian lost count of how many times he'd struck the same spot. The black-scaled python's armor finally split open, a wide wound gaping where his blade had struck. Ye Tian's strike drove straight through to the creature's heart. Its vital energy bled away. With a heavy thud, the python collapsed. Xiaojin's eyes went wide. It had known its master had grown stronger, but not like this, not terrifyingly so. It could hardly believe that Ye Tian, who had once been weaker, had slain the beast so easily. "Truly worthy of being my master," Xiaojin said proudly. After the python fell, Ye Tian moved quickly to collect its heartblood. Heartblood was the fiercest beast's most precious essence, the richest, most refined concentration of energy. Once the heartblood was secured, Ye Tian collected dozens of vials of high-grade fierce beast blood to make sure nothing leaked away. With that done, Xiaojin hauled the black-scaled python's carcass back to his place. It took him a long time to get it home. When he returned, the remaining high-grade blood was poured into the blood pool. "Xiaojin, you'll eat the python. Make sure you save the skin," Ye Tian ordered. "Got it," Xiaojin replied. He had no intention of eating the skin anyway. Python hide was far too tough to chew. Even if Ye Tian hadn't reminded him, he would have left it alone. While Xiaojin savored the python meat, Ye Tian settled down to fuse the mid-level defensive talent. He concentrated, drew the unfamiliar energy into himself, and felt heat spreading through his body. A bead of sweat ran down his brow, his skin tingled, and his face flushed as the transformation took hold. 10 minutes later, the fusion was complete. A translucent readout flashed across Ye Tian's vision with a single thought. Human. Ye Tian cultivation talent, top speed. Talent, top knife. Talent, medium shadow talent. Primary healing talent. Top strength. Talent, advanced endurance. Talent, medium defense talent, medium. In addition to cultivation, I already have 7 special talents. I might be the only one in the world like this, Ye Tian said to himself, a grin spreading across his face. He decided to test the defensive talent next. He pulled out the intermediate Yuanli sword and brought it down in a light slash across his left forearm. The blade struck, rang, and bounced off. No cut, just a dull clang against his skin. At first he had used only a modest amount of force, tens of thousands of pounds at most. That wasn't enough to pierce the skin, so he pushed harder, channeling more power until the strike registered about 150,000 pounds. Still nothing. The sword simply didn't penetrate. Strength talent, he muttered, activating the advanced ability. Power surged through him, his muscles tensed, and his output leapt dramatically. He tested again, starting cautiously at 200,000 pounds, but even that, now so easily produced, failed to break the body's defenses. Ye Tian narrowed his eyes and kept increasing his force, pouring more and more power into the strike. The sword continued to bounce off his arm, and a new realization settled in. Even a medium defense talent could withstand far more than he'd expected. At first, only when the force was pushed up to 250,000 jin did the blade finally break the skin. But that test had only used raw flesh against the strike. The true measure of a warrior's defense was the Yuanli Protector, and the strength of that shield depended on the body itself. Yuanli Protector, he murmured. A faint film of Yuan force shimmered over his skin. The attacker struck again, this time ramping the power up to 1.5 million jin. At last, the defense was pierced, not because his body was weak, but because that was the testing limit. From the result, he understood clearly. His body's defensive threshold was roughly 1.5 million jin. Most great martial artists wouldn't be able to cut through him. Ye Tian allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. This was only the beginning. If he pushed his cultivation to the peak of the great martial artist realm, he might well be able to stand there and let even peak experts strike without being wounded. With that Yuanli Protector layered over his already exceptional natural recovery, his survivability had multiplied several times over. For the next month, Ye Tian lived almost entirely in the little thousand-leaf forest, returning to the coastal base only on rare occasions. He trained relentlessly there, growing closer with his companion beast Xiao Jin as they hunted together. They slaughtered dozens of high-tier ferocious beasts and harvested a large cache of high-grade beast blood. Under that furious regimen, both man and beast rose in power at an astonishing rate. By the day it all came to a head, Ye Tian had pushed his physical strength up to 200,000 jin, about 100,000 kilograms. Xiao Jin had reached the peak of an early-stage high-level ferocious beast, and after a breakthrough, its speed jumped a tier, nearly 25 times the speed of sound. Ye Tian's own speed climbed as well, reaching roughly 23 times the speed of sound. Their relentless hunts had severely thinned the population of high-level ferocious beasts in the area, and that depletion finally attracted the notice of the apex predators lurking in the forest's depths. A deep, rolling rumble answered them from the shadows. A towering white ape, 50 meters tall, lumbered out from the depths of the Kochiba forest and began to patrol the vast territory where Xiao Jin was hiding. This land belonged to it. The other powerful beasts around were essentially its vassals, expected to bring occasional blood offerings in exchange for protection. But over the last few months, those offerings had grown scarce. Simple-minded and easily angered, the ape had finally come in person to demand answers. It paused on the edge of the clearing and looked around in growing confusion. None of the high-level beasts that used to inhabit this area were here anymore. Did they run off? It muttered to itself, displeasure rumbling through its chest. Then it bellowed. The ground trembled as the white giant strode forward, smashing tree after tree beneath its enormous feet. Suddenly, it picked up the scent of a high-level beast nearby. With a roar, it charged toward the source of the breath. The beast it closed on was none other than Xiao Jin. Chapter 59. Xiao Jin scoured the forest, hunting for high-level fierce beasts, but the number of suitable prey had dwindled. The usual haunts were growing barren, and going farther in felt dangerous. Something in the depths warned it not to go. As a fierce beast, it understood the Little Chiba Forest's strict hierarchy. Each region was dominated by a high-level predator, and lower-ranked beasts carved out only small pockets of territory. When Xiao Jin had been only a mid-level beast, a group of high-level predators had once tried to subdue it. It had fought them off and, by right of strength, claimed a small patch of land for itself. That was how it had become a minor landowner in the forest. Things had changed since then. Xiao Jin had grown powerful enough that it could easily take down a high-level beast, and within its own area, it was nearly invincible. Still, its power had limits. It stayed inside its territory and did not dare press deeper into regions ruled by stronger enemies. This area was home to the top-tier predators. If you ran into one, you wouldn't be able to fight back, and if it was stronger than you might not even get away. That was why Xiao Jin kept so well behaved and stayed put. This place was where high-level beasts could be found, but there was no shame in not finding one. The master had told it not to rush into hunting powerful beasts. Stay, wait a while, then leave the little Chiba forest together. Then a chill, world-shaking breath rolled in from afar. Top-tier beast! Even though Xiao Jin had never actually seen one, the aura was unmistakable. With a whoosh, Xiao Jin darted toward its owner. It had to warn them to get out of the forest now. From a distance, the white giant ape fixed Xiao Jin with a look that felt as if it were peering down through layers of space. The ape didn't know Xiao Jin, but this was its territory. Any intruder was expected to submit. If the intruder refused, it would become food. The ape's gaze narrowed, and the air hummed as it prepared to act. The white giant ape moved as if the world meant nothing to it. It ignored the massive trees and launched itself in a single bound that covered thousands of meters. Its speed was only slightly slower than Xiao Jin's, but its huge bulk gave it tremendous rebound, allowing it to vault over the giant trunks as if they weren't even there. The sight was breathtaking. Xiao Jin, by contrast, had to weave around each tree, constantly changing direction. Although naturally fast, the obstacles forced it to slow, and before long, the ape closed the gap. Seeing that mountain of a body and the oppressive aura rolling off it, Xiao Jin shuddered. At that moment, Xiao Jin felt the comforting presence of its master nearby and reached out mentally. "Master, come save me," it sent. The bond between pet and owner allowed this kind of telepathic contact, but only at close range. If they had been farther apart, the call would have failed. Ye Tian already saw the ape. The creature's terrifying aura saturated the 10-mile area. It was impossible to miss. "Xiao Jin!" Ye Tian cried urgently. He heard Xiao Jin's cry and tore through the trees. With Xiao Jin's strength, there was no way the little beast could stand against a top-tier ferocious beast. Ye Tian pushed himself harder, weaving between trunks until he was almost on top of them. Ahead, a massive white ape loomed over Xiao Jin, its huge hand covering him like a slab of sky. The little creature barely moved under that grip. Not an ordinary top beast, Ye Tian thought. The pressure rolling off the ape was far too great. Even among top-tier ferocious beasts, it had to be mid or upper rank. Ye Tian could bully weaker top beasts, but this white giant ape was another matter. He was no match for it in a straight fight. Still, he had to act. Xiao Jin was his first beast companion and had helped him countless times. If he let him die now, he'd never forgive himself. Besides, the ape wasn't so overwhelmingly powerful that Ye Tian felt hopeless. He moved. Speed talent on. Power talent on. Defensive talent on. A gate talent sprang open. Channeling it, Ye Tian launched a bronze-tier sword technique, the Qingfeng Chop, in full force, aiming straight for the ape. The knife had not only performed flawlessly, it had also integrated the two-point blade intent. Ye Tian had been cultivating for months. Under the blade's blessing, the weapon trembled the void, charged with a razor-sharp aura as if it could slice reality itself. The brilliant blue edge flared and, for an instant, became the heavenly blade, cleaving upward toward the white giant ape's palm. The cyan slash met the ape's hand, shearing off a tuft of white fur and leaving a shallow scar on the palm. It was a blow that stung the giant creature's pride, but it did not break the skin. "Xiao Jin, run!" Ye Tian shouted. Xiao Jin didn't hesitate. The little reptile snapped into top speed and fled. Ye Tian fell in right behind him. The white ape's fury exploded. To be wounded by such a tiny reptile was an unbearable humiliation. With a roar, it threw its punch. The void shuddered, countless ancient trees turned to powder. Ye Tian felt an overwhelming force drive through the air, and bracing himself, snapped his backhand up and struck with everything he had. Boom! The supreme force slammed into Ye Tian's body. His Yuanli shield shattered in an instant, and deep cracks ran across his flesh, but his top-tier healing talent kicked in, and the wounds closed almost as quickly. That kind of power, it must be at least 30 million pounds. Ye Tian ran the numbers in his head. His base physical strength was 200,000 pounds. With his strength talent, it could be boosted to about 2 million. Qingfeng Chop multiplied that by 6, pushing his strike to roughly 12 million. With the support of Yuan Force, he could reach around 24 million. Yet the white giant ape had easily broken through his attack and left him so badly injured, it had to be delivering closer to 30 million pounds of force. Then Ye Tian's talent sense illuminated the ape's attributes. Species, Titanson bloodline, talent, top strength, talent, elementary. I see, it's a top-tier bloodline, but only a primary strength talent. He exhaled with a sudden chill. It hasn't even reached full growth yet. If it had, one blow would have finished me. Not even my top healing could have saved me. Panic flared. Escape. Now. He was no match. He had planned to lie low in the little thousand-leaf forest for a while, but that idea had to be abandoned. Fortunately, the Titan didn't move very fast, so Ye Tian and Xiao Jin still had a chance to get away. A thunderous strike landed as the Titan Sen ape swung at Ye Tian again. The blow didn't kill him, only wounded him, and Ye Tian's supreme healing talent mended the damage almost as quickly as it was done. Like a little tank that couldn't be felled, he survived blow after blow. Slowly, step by step, Ye Tian and Xiao Jin pushed toward the forest's edge. Then, in a flash of light, they burst out of the little thousand-leaf forest. Beyond the trees lay a vast open land, stretching out before them. Chapter 60. Once they cleared the edge of the little thousand-leaf forest, Ye Tian and Xiao Jin could finally unleash their full speed. Outside the trees, there were hardly any obstacles, so Xiao Jin accelerated without restraint, the worrying, cramped helplessness they'd felt inside the little Chiba forest, a distant memory. Ye Tian sat astride him as Xiao Jin shifted into pure power, surging forward at 25 times the speed of sound. They became a streak of light racing over the ground. The Titan Sen ape had chased them out of the forest, but as soon as it tried to match Xiao Jin's pace, it fell behind. Realizing it couldn't catch them, the ape slapped its chest, let out a few frustrated roars, and reluctantly turned back into the little thousand-leaf forest. When Ye Tian saw the ape give up the pursuit, he signaled for Xiao Jin to stop. They came to a halt and looked around. They were now far from the coastal base, easily a few hundred miles away. Ye Tian didn't dare run straight for the coastal base. The base was too close to the little Chiba forest. If they sprinted back that way, the beasts from the Titan forest might follow them right to the settlement. To avoid drawing the predators toward the base, he sent Xiao Jin off in the opposite direction and kept his distance from the coastline. He and Xiao Jin spent the next half hour finding their way back. It took them a while to locate the base again. Ye Tian would never admit it, but they had almost lost their bearings. When they finally arrived at the coastal base together, everyone there was stunned. Getting a beast to submit is rare. Most of those creatures are too dim to understand the idea of surrender. In a fierce beast's mind, there are only two outcomes: the enemy dies or the beast dies. Countless warriors have tried to subdue even mid-level ferocious creatures, and almost all of them fail. That was why Ye Tian's return with Xiao Jin caused such a shock. Ye Tian had actually managed to tame a top-level ferocious beast, a golden silk dragon leopard. If anyone found out that Xiao Jin also possessed a top-tier speed talent, they'd be green with envy. The value of a creature like that would be astronomical. If beast pets could be traded, someone would surely pay a fortune to buy Xiao Jin. Yeyu grew visibly uneasy the moment she saw him. Xiao Jin's body stretched nearly 10 meters long, and his aura was overwhelming. She had only just advanced to the warrior rank, and the leopard's breath made her stagger. "Xiao Jin, compress your breath," Ye Tian ordered, patting the beast's head as he spoke. Xiao Jin gave a small, aggrieved roar at Ye Tian and wagged his tail, then obediently drew in his aura. If it weren't for his enormous size, the way he settled down would have made him look like a harmless kitten. "Sis, this is Xiao Jin, the beast I tamed," Ye Tian said, introducing them. "Go ahead and get to know him. Don't worry, Xiao Jin won't hurt you." Yeyu, encouraged, finally managed to greet Xiao Jin. "Hello, Xiao Jin. My name is Yeyu." Xiao Jin rubbed its head against her and gave her a gentle nudge, a clear sign of friendship. It already understood that the small figure in front of it was its master's sister, and that, sooner or later, she would be someone it had to protect. Ye Tian had told it as much. When he was away, Xiao Jin was to keep Ye Yu safe. It would not disobey his orders, so it made an effort to get on well with from the start. Later that day, Ye Tian went to the Wu Pavilion. He had come to see the pavilion's lord to discuss some important matters. The owner of the Wu Pavilion was notoriously mysterious. Few people had ever laid eyes on him, and he rarely granted audiences. If not for Ye Tian's standing, the lord would almost certainly have refused to meet him. Ye Tian had expected an old man behind the pavilion's reputation, but when the curtain was finally pulled back, he found a man in his 30s, still young, but exceptional in talent and presence. Name, Yue Zhang. Human type, cultivation talent. Advanced sword talent, medium strength. Talent, primary. An advanced cultivation talent by itself wasn't extraordinary. Many mid-sized bases, like the Iron Tooth base, produced people with high cultivation. But Yue Zhang came from one of the larger bases. As the Martial Pavilion chief of Linhai base, his advanced cultivation was only the mark of a minor prodigy. What set him apart was the unusual combination of a medium-level sword talent and a primary strength talent. Together, those two pillars made him far stronger than many peers, stronger even than Sun Kong and the other Sun family talents. I pay my respects, Lord Yue. Ye Tian bowed courteously. Yue Zhang returned the gesture quickly, then deflected the formality with a modest smile. I'm only the Martial Pavilion's cabinet master at Linhai base. Master Ye is too kind. May I ask why Secmaster Ye wished to see me? Ye Tian did not correct the title. Yue Zhang had earned the respect it implied. He met Yue's eyes directly and spoke without pretense. Lord Yue, since you come from one of the big bases, I want to know how to get there. Yue Zhang smiled faintly. He wasn't particularly surprised by Ye Tian's question. A talent who had already outclassed the Linhai base at such a young age wouldn't be content to stay there. Of course, he would be longing for a grand base. Yue Zhang didn't hide anything. I'm from the Demon Sea Grand Base, about 3,000 kilometers from the Linhai base. That distance isn't a problem for someone from a grand base, but the route is dangerous. Even with luck, you might run into top-tier beasts. For that reason, the grand bases rarely send people down here, except on special occasions. At the coastal base, there are really only two major grand base contingents, our Woog branch and the coastal branch of the Magic Sea Bank. The Demon Sea Bank hardly ever sends people, but Woog's tradition of dispatching personnel here once a year has never changed. Lord Yue, Ye Tian asked, do you mean I can only go to the grand base when Woogie sends people, once a year? I can't go by myself? Yue Zhang smiled. You can't go alone. Master Ye, you don't really understand the big bases, do you? I don't, Ye Tian admitted. Yue Zhang nodded and began to explain. A little over 100 years ago, the world was much smaller and the cities were close together. Then the end came. Savage beasts poured through spatial rifts, and the land itself reacted, growing strangely alive and swelling to an enormous size. People estimate it expanded by hundreds of times, but no one knows the exact scale. At first, the human population collapsed, but over the past century, the large bases steadily claimed territory and encouraged high birth rates. As a result, each grand base now holds huge numbers of people. Their technology has advanced, and there are countless specialists and talents. Do you know how many people live in the Demon Sea Grand Base? 1 million? Ye Tian guessed. 10 million, Yue Zhang said gravely. What? Ye Tian stared. In this post-apocalyptic world, a single grand base held 10 million people, comparable to the major first-tier cities of the old world. With a population of 10 million, the forces gathered here were enormous. The Demon Sea Grand Base was essentially a city, a metropolis grown over a century of construction by countless hands, Yue Zhang said. Here, scientists use yuanli as if it were electricity. Yuanli-powered air conditioners, cars, elevators. The entire base is covered by a massive yuanli array. Wild beasts simply can't breach it. He paused, then added, entry is strictly controlled. Everything is tied to yuanli identity verification. Everyone in the coastal base carries a yuanli ID card. Without one, you can't come and go freely. Yuanli identity card? Ye Tian repeated, and suddenly everything clicked. That was why he couldn't get into the grand base on his own. He had no card. Only warriors attached to the Martial Pavilion, who had proper credentials, could pass the checkpoints. Brother Yue, Ye Tian asked the question that had been nagging him. How long will the people from Wu Pavilion stay? The next convoy doesn't leave for another month, Yuzhong replied.